and the meeting on Monday has been canceled. The presentation is first about the applicant, then the committee has questions and comments, board members not on the committee, guests, and then the public, and 2 minutes each, please, for the public. When it comes time for that, again, raise your hands. Everyone be sure to lower your hands now so we don't get confused. And Eugene will call on people one by one and upgrade them to be able to speak. For the applicants, would you please state your name and the address of the property? Also for the applicants, what you present tonight is what we would hope to be nearly the same as what goes to the commission. If there are big changes, other than changes that we have recommended in the resolution, it's necessary to come back here for a public review of substantially what is going to be presented. Particularly for tonight, note that the Landmarks Committee and indeed the Commission deals specifically with landmark issues of applications. There are many auxiliary items that come up. There are other concerns that come out of these applications and the other two things we're considering tonight. And we might touch briefly on them, but if there's testimony, it should be specifically on the landmark aspect of whatever the application or topic is. Zoom is really only for technical matters such as not being able to be recognized or heard, and it's not a place to make comments for the good reason that it is not a part of the record, and this being a public meeting, whatever is said must be on the record. We appreciate with everyone brevity, of course. The business session, anyone is welcome to stay, and only in the end, the committee members may speak and deliberate. We have the two special reports tonight, and I'll speak about those when we get to them. We'll have a bit of a different order tonight in that we'll do the two applications. We'll then have the business session for them. Then we'll do one by one the other two topics, and the result of that discussion will be a formulation of the conclusion that we draw. In those cases, the public will be asked to speak at the beginning. We'll go over all this. We'd like to welcome Dina Tess-Winter, who is the new Director of Preservation and Research at Village Preservation. We've had an interim person from the office lately, and Dina is permanently with us, and we'll get a chance to see her later because she's going to present some testimony. Eugene, if you get the first applicant up.
Yes, so this would be the
For the ramps.
ramps. Okay, I will promote Lorenzo Wilkerson.
There's a flaw in the title. It should be well, that's not a flaw. It was too much to list all the locations, so we just said various locations in Soho. Applications to install non-standard pedestrian ramps with granite paver crosswalks at the various locations, and they'll point out the ones that are important. We can begin now.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Can I be allowed to share my screen?
Say yes. You should have that privilege now.
I still don't.
Eugene, he does.
Yeah, we're using a different Zoom host. Let me just change that. All right, you want to try again?
Thank you. Okay, can everyone see it clearly? Okay, so I'm just going to turn off my. So this is the installation of non-standard pedestrian ramps with granite paver crosswalks in the borough of Manhattan, specifically in Community Board number 2. The 4 projects that we plan on discussing today that are within your community board is HWPR 20 MCL, HWP 2020 LM, HWPR 19 MC1, and HWPR 20 MKL. What's the next one? So what we plan on discussing is just the project location list. We'll also talk about project objectives, the proposed treatments that we plan on using, then existing conditions and proposed conditions, and then project timelines. So let's start with our first subject, which is our project location list. So as I mentioned, we have the 4 projects that are within your community board specific locations. In MC1, we are going to be upgrading some ramps with the crosswalks at Prince Street and Wooster, Spring Street and Greene, Grand Street and Mercer Street, Prince Street and Mercer Street. For HWPR 20 MKL, we're going to be upgrading the pedestrian ramps and crosswalks at Charlton and 6th Avenue, Broome Street and Greene Street, Broome Street and Mercer Street, Grand Street and Wooster Street, and Prince Street and MacDougal Street. And then at MC, for the project HWPR 20 MCL, we'll be upgrading some of the corners at 6th Avenue and King, and then for 2020 LM, Greene Street and Prince Street. So what are the objectives that our projects are trying to achieve? Well, we're going to upgrade all the ramps that are there to that are non-standard, meaning that some aspect of the ramp is not in compliance with ADA federal standards, and we're going to make them compliant with detectable warnings, with appropriate slopes, so that it's accessible for all those with low vision, those with other types of disabilities. We'll also be using standard DOT materials, so pigmented concrete sidewalk within the landmark districts with New York historical granite curb and cobblestones and granite paver materials, as we'll show in our next couple of slides. So let's talk about the proposed treatment. So at the crosswalks, we're going to be using these granite pavers as we see in the picture here on the left. So it's a smooth surface, it's rideable. We have our large 2-foot by 3-foot granite pavers, and then we'll also have smooth ADA compliant cobblestone. Current cobblestone is not ADA compliant because it's not a smooth surface. The ones that we'll be putting in will have a textured surface, so even when wet, so if there's a rain or some type of storm, they'll still be able to have some traction so that anyone won't have to slip. Our next slide just talks about the proposed treatments from more of a drawing point of view. So on our left here, we have a bird's eye aerial view of how it would look, the crosswalk. So we have our granite header that will be adjacent to both sides of the crosswalk. And then we'll have our alternating patterns of ADA cobblestone with also granite pavers. Here on the right, it shows a cross section of how we plan on supporting those materials once they're installed in the ground. Sometimes if you notice when you're walking along a cobblestone street, we have cobblestones that kind of sink into the ground. So what we're going to be doing with the crosswalks is we're going to be supporting them with a 9-inch concrete bed. So this will be able to keep a smooth riding surface no matter what during that whole time. Also the granite curbs, the granite headers, excuse me, will be supported with a concrete cradle. And then depending on what type of existing treatment the roadway is, if it's cobblestones, that'll be put back to cobblestones, or if it's asphalt, they'll be shown with asphalt. Our next slide shows an actual location of where this has been installed in the city. This is over in Community Board District number 1 in Lower Manhattan. This is at Vestry Street and Hudson Street. And as we can see, it keeps to the historic nature of the neighborhood, but it provides a nice, clean walking surface for the public, which is clearly delineated between the roadway at the intersection and within the street section. Our next slide just is a nice close-up shot of just how it looks when it interfaces with the curb. So existing conditions. These are some of the spots in which we plan on installing these granite crosswalks. Now, DOT has several different projects in which they're upgrading or installing pedestrian ramps all throughout the city. And in these projects, certain locations are within historic districts, and the granite paver sidewalks are going to be included in those. So at the location of Prince and Wooster, we have the two crosswalks, which we're going to be upgrading, as you noticed with both of them. They've been through a lot. We see it's not uniform, even the material that's being used there, because of several different types of utility cuts that have happened in the past. Moving on to our next slide, this is basically from the design of what we plan to install. So we have our sort of purple color, light purple, which is the pigmented concrete sidewalk, and then we have sort of in our little orange here, which is a representation of where the granite paver sidewalk is going to be installed. And then you can also see the other types of sidewalk that will be, crosswalks that'll be installed in the regular asphalt area. And we see that all four corners in this location are being upgraded. Our next location for MC1 is Spring Street and Greene Street. This has some pavers, but they were not to the current DOT standard. So we're going to be putting in the current DOT standard for the crosswalk, and we're going to be upgrading the ramps at this location. This is a representation of what's being designed at this intersection. So all four corners are going to be replaced. We have several different types of treatments that are within the DOT toolkit to make the ramps compliant. So we have curb extensions that we're going to be putting in. We can see that on the top left-hand corner. We have a blended transition that's going to be installed on the top right-hand corner and on the bottom right-hand corner. And then we have two tangent ramps or perpendicular ramps that are going to be installed on the bottom. And then you can see where the granite paver crosswalks are going to be installed. Our next intersection is Grand Street and Mercer Street. It has an existing condition as per the previous location. And then we'll move on to the next slide. And we're only going to be working on 3 of the corners here because DOT has considered this corner compliant. So we'll be installing some curb extensions with some blended transitions and some 2 tangent ramps on the left-hand side of the intersection and a blended transition on the right. And we can see the granite paver crosswalks that we're going to be installing that will be crossing Mercer Street. Our next intersection is Prince Street and Mercer Street. And we can see some of the ununiform material that we have with some of the utility cuts from the past. We see someone tried to put in a makeshift ramp here at this location as well. So what we'll be doing at this one is we'll be working on 3 of the corners. We'll be installing 2 tangent ramps on the top right. Top left, we'll be installing a blended transition. Bottom right, a shared bottom landing. And then we'll be installing the granite paver crosswalks that will be crossing Mercer Street. Our next location is in the project 20 MKL. This is Charlton Street and 6th Avenue. You notice here that we have also not uniform material where it's one material in one location, but due to the utility cuts, it's asphalt in others. This location, DOT has specified that only one corner needs to be upgraded. And then on Charlton Street, we'll be providing the granite paver crosswalk, which will be running parallel to 6th Avenue.
Oh, sir, as you move along from one project number to the next, is there any difference from our point of view in these groupings?
We've grouped the projects all together, but these projects, these locations are, as I will get to the last slide, we'll talk about the timeline, but all the projects have ramps that are going to be upgraded in all of them, but
they
only
all have the same purpose.
Yeah, all the same purpose. Yeah, it's just that DOT has specified different locations to be in different projects. So each project has about 60 or 70 locations in it approximately. So we couldn't have all of them in one project, at least not at this time. So our next one is HWPR 20 MKL, and this is at Broome Street and Greene Street. And we see the existing conditions, and we plan on working on all four corners here and installing the granite paver crosswalks crossing Greene Street. Next one for MKL is Broome Street and Mercer Street. These are the existing conditions. And this is where we plan on installing the granite paver crosswalks here, which are going to be crossing Mercer Street as well. We have some curb extensions, so we're going to be shortening the crossing to make it a little bit more accessible, also due to some vault conditions that we've encountered during our design. Our next location is Greene Street and Wooster Street, and we see just the various different types of materials within the crosswalk area on both sides of the street in which we're going to be installing the granite paver crosswalks. And this is a representation of where we plan on putting the new ped ramps and the new granite paver crosswalks. So we have a curb extension and some tangent ramps that we're going to be installing. Our next one is at Prince Street in MacDougal. This is the existing condition. As you can see, once again, different types of materials within the crosswalk, and the ramps are not to current standards. And we plan on upgrading them both sides and putting in a nice wide granite paver crosswalk here. Next one is HWPR 20 MCL. This is close by 6th Avenue and King Street. And we're going to be installing the granite paver crosswalks on both sides of the intersection along King. And this is a representation of basically where and how that's going to be done. All four corners are going to be worked on. And the granite paver crosswalks, as I mentioned, are going to be crossing King Street on both sides, on the east and west. Our last location is HWP 2020 LM. This is at Greene Street and Prince Street. So this is the existing condition. And then this is where we plan on putting our granite paver crosswalks in conjunction with our ramps, as we see here. So project timelines. So for HWP R19 MC1, we're basically in the pre-bid stage. So we've wrapped up our design. We've gotten most of our approvals. We're working with LPC now, but we had to come to the community board first. For MKL, we are in the final design stage, and we plan on finishing in the fall. I'm sorry, for MC1, we plan on, as I mentioned, we plan on probably going out to bid in the next month or two. For our next one, which is HWPR MCL, we're in final design as well, and that one plans to be finished in the fall. And our last one is HWP 2020 LM. That's in preliminary design right now, and we plan on finishing that project at the end of the year. And these should all be in construction next year. That's the end of our presentation. One thing that we are looking for is just a letter of support. If
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. I think it's all clear. What we're here particularly addressing is, simply put, what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, and if you would just say in more detail, if you can, or make a point of it, the way in which the materials blend or in harmony with the historic pavings, particularly the cobblestones.
Yeah, so this is one location. That's why I included this slide that you can see here from the proposed treatment. This is what we did at the location of Vestry Street and Hudson Street. We've actually included these granite paver crosswalks in many historic districts throughout the city, and LPC has approved all of them. But as you can see here, the cobblestones they're incorporated into the crosswalk, but we also provide a smooth granite paver the granite pavers, which allow for a smooth riding surface, so that those with disabilities can easily make it across the street from one curb
Clearly, a
to
cobblestone is not a good surface for a wheelchair, so that's.
Yes, it's not. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be installing smooth ADA compliant cobblestones. So they will be cobblestones and they will look similar to what is out there, but they'll be smooth so that they will be ADA compliant.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee?
There's three of us with hands raised. Night, Albert.
Okay, my question is, I call them curb cuts, you call them ramps. Will this new version do anything toward eliminating the puddles that collect and make it impossible for us to use those ramps?
Yes, so we're designing them so that all the flow will go from around the corner. So we'll be installing also new catch basins to collect rainwater so that there won't be any puddling in front of the pedestrian ramps or curb cuts, as you mentioned.
That would be a huge help. And you're going to do this in the village also?
Yes, so we'll be at every location within the project limits. We will, wherever we're installing the new pedestrian ramps, we will be making sure that there will be no puddles. All the water will flow either around the curve or it will flow from the midpoint around both sides of the curve. But we will be getting all the water into the catch basins and not in front of the pedestrian ramps.
Thank you very much.
There are other questions?
Yes. So can I go?
Yes.
All right. Well, having those catch basins, that would be wonderful. I mean, it's tricky to eliminate those
Yes.
puddles. So first of all, I highly commend you for doing these improvements. They're very much needed. They're very beneficial. As you know, it's just it's going to be a tremendous improvement, because right now, every time the city repaves the streets with cobblestone, they do a terrible job. Whoever the contractor is doing a terrible job. I've seen it in the Greenwich Village, in the meatpacking district, the Gansevoort area, and in Soho, where within a year, the streets are virtually impassable because the cobblestones have resettled, they've broken up. It's just such a terrible thing that I'm concerned about the city being ripped off. And so these kinds of improvements are going to be tremendous improvements. And I really commend you on doing these proposals. And I'm 100% in favor of them. And I'm just delighted that this work is being done. My question is on King Street. It seems to me that none of the intersection with King Street, 6th Avenue, for instance, none of it is cobblestone. If I am not correct about that, it seems to be all asphalt. So I'm wondering, so you're putting in stone intersection crosswalks, but it's all asphalt. Is that not correct?
So there's a different type of block here, if you notice in our picture here. So there was a distinct material that was used. So the standard DOT material that we would use is either asphalt. So to keep with the character of this intersection, we were going to come back with the granite paver crosswalk.
I see. It is an asphalt street, but the crosswalk has some kind of paving.
Distinctive material, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And congratulations on this project.
Other people, just go along the group, whoever wants to speak. Eugene.
Yeah, I mean, can I speak? I have my hand up, Bo.
Okay.
I apologize. I had trouble getting in. I finally got in the meeting. And maybe, this was addressed. Again, I apologize. Number one, to Brian's point, what happens is, as we probably most of us know, individual contractors come and, if you have a water problem, or there are many reasons that the streets are torn up, and then they're not put back in the proper way. That just the nature of it, whether it's Con Ed or the telephone companies or water, a lot of stuff requires attention to the water feeds that go into the individual buildings. So I don't think we'll ever get good cobblestones, but because of this, the necessity of doing this, it has to happen, happens all the time, and the repairs are not good. That said, though, the crosswalk issue, I don't know if anybody's mentioned this, but I know, I'm part of the Soho Alliance, and we're very concerned about the fact that the pavers might be too large because they crack. And we've had this has happened over the years. There's an honest attempt like this apparently is to do the right thing, but because there's an incline at those intersections, the fact that the pavers are so large, in my opinion, makes them very susceptible to cracking, and they do in fact crack. And then at some point, some of us were able to get DOT to go back and redo the crosswalks in a smaller brick-like fashion. But I wonder if the representative could opine on that. If maybe these pavers are better than the ones that we've had in the past. That's possible, but if they're the same, they're going to crack. Whether it's in 2 months or 6 months, they're going to crack.
Well, the project that I have shown here, the slide that I have shown, we installed this a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, and it's still in good condition. At DDC, we work with DOT to make sure we use materials that can last. So the materials that we have shown here now are standard DOT materials. So they're going to be used all throughout. So it's something that DOT will readily have available, or they can get available, because it's a standard product. So,
well, it may be, but I mean, I don't want to think that they're going to crack and then we'll have to wait for DOT to come back and fix them. We don't want them to crack in the first place. And I'm just suggesting that the large, how big are those pavers? You know the dimension?
2 foot by 3 foot.
That sounds like it's pretty big. I don't know why you need that. I mean, I guess it's easier for, I don't know why you need it. It seems to
Okay,
me.
thank you, Bo. The question's been put and the answer's been given.
Well, the answer's been given, but I don't know if there was any thought to that answer. I mean, yes.
If you don't like the answer, that's fine. We'll discuss that.
It's not a question of liking the answer. It's a question of stating the fact that I think those are too large, and I didn't hear any response that suggested that they're not too large. I mean, all you said is that if they crack, you're going to replace them.
Okay, thank you. Are there others, Eugene?
If I could step in real quick to talk about the different pavers. So the reason between having the smaller pavers, sorry, this is Lindsay Burkon with DDC. I'm part of this project as well. And the whole idea of having the two different size pavers, with the smaller pavers with the larger pavers, is to bring attention to the crosswalk. Since we don't paint on the cobbles, in order for vehicles to see the crosswalk, that's the reason why we use the larger pavers, in order to make that distinction and to bring attention to the crosswalk. And honestly, this is the first time that I've heard that the large pavers are cracking. DDC, we typically don't hear that. If you could let us know which intersection that is, maybe it was with an older treatment. But we can also look into that.
Okay, I'm just saying they were done once and then they cracked and then they were redone. I mean, I'm talking about over 20 years, that's all, but go ahead, whatever.
Thank you. Are there others who wish to speak on the committee?
Yeah,
Yes,
sir, it's Brendan. Hey, Brendan.
thank you, Corenzo. This is great. I have a few questions. First, I just want to say that what you're doing here, what you have up on the screen, that's a traditional method. Is that correct? That's from like the early 19th century.
The crosswalk,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, no, the crosswalk itself. So what I want to say to follow up on that is the substrate section is cement, and there's typically some sort of buffer between, in the past, an asphalt and sand material. And so that also relates to the joint as well, so that they can move. That's great that vestry is holding up. Does that have the same amount of traffic that like these streets will have, where you have cars stopping right on them? Anyways, so that's just one point. The other point that's good about this is that they're perpendicular to the car flow. And that's always been a problem. I've seen you've done a bunch of prototypes over here in Soho.
Hey, do you have a question about this? What is the?
Sure. Okay, you want me to put in a question? Have you like studied London's the early 19th century installations to inform this conversation? Because my worry moving forward is that just having it rest on cement is a little challenging. My second question on top of that is that I see a sawn edge, and that it could also be an issue in terms of the edges cracking. With the most successful work that you've done here is on the corner of Greene and Broome, where you've used a kind of textured and curved, like a chamfered edge. So I wanted to bring that out when you're thinking about just using the fire polished granite block. So, yep, that's
Okay,
my-
thank you. Is anyone else? Anyone not on the committee, from the board, from the public?
Yes, we have questions from the public. Shall we move on to the public questions?
Yes, please.
Okay. First, Coral Dawson, and then next we have Pete Davies.
Okay, great. Can you hear me? This is Coral.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I live at Spring and Mercer. So my first question is to ask why that intersection is not included in this one. And then my second one is, over the past, I guess, 2 years, our section has been replaced at least 3 times because they're not as large as the granite ones that you're proposing, but they're larger than the cobblestone that was in the rest of the street has been replaced because it's gone flying. And scattered pieces have ended up all over the street. And we actually have a lot in our building now that we use as door openers in the basement because they were flying all over the sidewalk.
Are you discussing one of the corners on this proposal?
No, that's another one. The Spring and Mercer is not on the proposal. So my question is why is it not on the proposal?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
We're only considering what's been presented here.
Okay.
We understand.
So then the question would be,
And if you have a problem with something else, please contact the community board office and they will address that.
Okay, so I guess my question for him would be, how would you ensure that the flying cobblestones that have happened in other intersections that you've recently redone doesn't happen in these new ones? Because I'd love to see them actually be successful, as you're saying, but the ones that we just recently had redone are having real trouble.
So I can't speak about the ones that were, I'm not sure who did those. I'm not sure if, the Department of Design and Construction did them.
It's DOT. I even have pictures of the trucks that came after our 311s. It was definitely DOT.
So what we do when we're redoing the cobblestone in those areas, as I mentioned earlier, we put back concrete. We put back a nice bed of concrete. So usually it'll be a minimum of 6 inches, sometimes 9 inches. We'll also have a sand bed so that they can slightly move, but they'll have a mortar joint so that they don't fly or break apart. That's the purpose of them.
Okay, I'm happy to send what's happened to whoever would like to see them. I can send it through the board for you to have visuals of what's happened, because I've definitely documented it over each time.
Gotcha. And what we always suggest is 311, bring it to DOT's
Yeah, no,
attention.
they're the ones that came and they come and responded every
we
time.
explained this, we can't discuss the whole neighborhood and structure. Your other questions, you have a place to present them. This is simply not it.
That's fine.
Okay, are there other members of the public who wish to speak?
Yes, so we have Pete Davies. Pete Davies is next, and after Pete will be Jeffrey Rowland, and then we have two other members of the public after
Okay.
that. So Pete, go ahead.
Great, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions. On your slide that says proposed treatment that shows vestry, the corner pads that are seen there are white.
Yes.
The things that those are
Detectable
rubber or
warning strips,
plastic or whatever material they are, they're white here. Is that what we're gonna get in Soho?
Yes, you'll be getting,
Great.
because it's pigmented concrete, you'll have the dark concrete on the sidewalk. Based on the current federal and ADA standards, there has to be a contrast for those with low vision. So we'll have the white on the dark.
Great, so we won't be getting yellow or red like we see
No.
elsewhere.
No.
Okay, great.
As long
Then-
as, sorry, as long as the corners are in a historic area. So if you have streets that are not considered historic or landmark, they will get the red ones.
Okay.
Okay.
And then for the areas, particularly where the bump outs are being built and the drains are being, whatever.
Catch
you call
basins
that, is
installed?
being
Yes.
Dug,
Mhm.
two things. One, what is the time frame for when that corner will be out of service? And what is being planned for crossing while a crosswalk is being laid and therefore that crossing is not available?
Good questions. So during construction, more than likely there'll be a DDC contact or liaison that can communicate back and forth with the community board, and they'll let the community board know where they plan on working and how long they estimate that they would plan on being at a certain corner. Since we do our projects as joint projects, so we'll also have Con Ed and all the other utilities who need to go in there to make any adjustments so that they don't have to rip up the corner again. So when we have what we call a CCL, the community liaison individual, they can work with the community to let individuals know how long they plan on working at a corner. If it's a couple of days, if it's a couple of weeks, they'll give you somewhat of a time frame. That's to answer the first question. But I can't give you an answer right now because I'm not the contractor. I'm just one of the designers. So I can't give you what I don't know, and it'll be up to the contractor to determine how long they plan to be at a corner. But the DDC liaison individual will be able to provide the community board with updated information as they go along. Now, with regarding to when the corner is out of commission, we have what we call MPT, maintenance and protection of traffic, but that also refers to pedestrians as well. So they will be installing walkways and temporary pedestrian ramps so that individuals will be able to get off the curb and they'll be able to travel in a safe passageway around, which will be protected from the traffic. So there'll be lighted timber curbs and also pedestrian channelizers, which we'll be using so that individuals, if they're blind or low vision, they'll be able to use their canes or walkers to be able to delineate where their passage is so that they can get onto and off the curbs.
And if there are any specific issues with the building because of vaults or whatever, you'll be providing a contact coordinator or?
Yes, there'll be
How does that work?
a CCL individual from DDC,
Okay.
and the community board will be able to talk to that individual about any concerns with regarding the project, and then they'll work with the contractor to hopefully help resolve those.
Okay, so the community board will have to coordinate something with the community so the community knows who to be in touch with to get to you guys.
Yes, as I said, we have a community liaison individual from DDC,
Okay.
and they work with the community. They do that on all of our DDC projects.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you, Pete. Next is Jeffrey Rowland. And then after Jeffrey, we have Charlton St.
Hello, I'm going to ask about a specific on page 12, I think it is, of the application that shows the intersection of Spring Street and Greene Street. You have a bunch of different kinds of curb treatments, and I don't know if those are suggestions for what may be used in different places and no decision has been made, or if the bump out, for example, the decision has already been made, and if so, on what basis has it been decided that it is within historic representation? Because clearly there are no bump outs in history of Soho. So that seems inappropriate. In addition to which, there's a shared lane, bike lane for Spring Street, which complicates it considerably when you have bump outs because pedestrians have a tendency to stand too close to the edge. And also, has this proposal, this particular change in the intersection, building bump outs, been before the Traffic and Transportation Committee at any time, or does it expect to be? Those are my questions.
Okay, so for the first one, these aren't suggestions. These designs have all been approved by DOT and been coordinated with several other different city agencies and utilities.
I meant in their specific places that you've shown them, like, you know, the northwest corner.
Yes.
That
Everything.
in that specific location, and the other one is in that specific. So in other words, you wouldn't do a bump out on the other side, just that one.
Yeah, just as we have shown. That's what we're going to be doing.
Right. So that would be objectionable to me, precisely because of history. There's no point in changing what existed in Soho beforehand. But carry on, please.
Yeah. So the reason why we're doing these different types of treatments, there are a variety of different reasons. Some are because of existing building vaults, and we're not touching those building vaults. Others are because of utilities. Others are because of grading purposes. So the city has to provide access for individuals to get on and off the curbs. So we're using all the different types of treatments to be able to do that, and different corners, you know, have different limitations, you know, with regard to what we can and cannot do. But their main goal here is to make sure that we have ramps so that individuals can get on and off the curbs.
Well, there's nothing fundamentally different about the corner on the northwest side and the northeast side.
Sir,
So
if you
I don't understand why you have to have the bump out.
Sir, if you'll just put the questions and let him answer, then
well, I'm trying to ask the question, Chenault. I'm trying to ask
it's not a
specific
discussion.
question of why that particular location is different than the
It's
other
because
location.
of grading and because of the vaults underneath. So that's the answer to your question, because of grading and because of the vaults underneath.
And also, just to piggyback off of what Corenzo is saying, is for these types of projects, which are considered the non-standard ped ramp projects, we try not to do any bump outs or curb extensions unless DOT specifically asks for them. But in cases in which we can provide a bump out and provide an ADA compliant corner, we will add those types of treatments to the specific corner based off of our constraints. And the whole point of our project is to become ADA compliant. So if you look at the curb line, and if you go down to the next slide, Corenzo, I think that we show the existing and proposed. There are the steel plates. I believe the picture on the right is the picture that we're looking at. And with those steel plates, we cannot move them, or there's vaults underneath. And so the only option that we could provide access would be to have a bump out.
The other questions were, has it been before the Traffic and Transportation Committee?
I'll answer this. So with our ADA compliancy, in order to reach ADA compliancy, for these types of projects, we are not going to the regular community boards, since we are not asking for people's opinions. This is for accessibility. I'm not sure if everybody is aware, but it's on the DOT website. DOT and the city has been in a major lawsuit in which we have to provide access for every corner in the city. If you could imagine, we have 50 locations in each of these projects. So you're only seeing a portion of them. So we do not attend community board meetings unless we need approval for LPC. And that's pretty much the only time that we go to community boards is for whenever we need additional approval in which those agencies ask for us to go to them.
And again, if you have a comment or problem or question, address the community board office for non-landmarks things, and they'll put you to the right place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others, Eugene?
Yeah.
Yes, next we have Sean Sweeney.
Probably to Lindsay. Oh, go Sean. You're muted.
Hi, my name is Sean Sweeney. I'm the director of the Soho Alliance and have had intimate knowledge of the reconstruction of Greene and Mercer Streets and the original presentations back in those days when I was the landmarks chair. The work was done by excellent construction people. They were imported from Spain and Italy. They were great stonemasons. So the work, because the pavers cracked, was not because of the workmanship. It was because of the basic fact that the street is curved for drainage and you have 2 by 3 foot pavers there and they're going to crack. And Greene Street and Mercer Street is a lot more busy than Vestry Street, a by street, a side street in Tribeca. So I guarantee you, you're talking about lawsuits. People have already sued the city because they fell from the DOT's original pavers back 25 years ago. I worked with Margaret Forgione. You might remember her. She was the Manhattan Commissioner of DOT. Took us several years.
Do you have a question for the gentleman?
I want to educate these people because I don't want people breaking their clavicles, my neighbors, which has happened. And I tripped on it once. This is a safety issue. So Margaret Forgione, it took us 2 or 3 years to replace those with little brick size that you see there now to prevent people from being injured. So this is a landmark district. Let's talk about the aesthetics, therefore. We don't want cracked pavers 2 years from now, which is going to happen, and take another 3 or 4 years to put the bricks back what we had to do back in 2005. So that's not my question, but I know DOT thinks they know everything. You work with bulldozers, and you're trying to bulldoze us here. But you watch. I want to see you. I'm going to be back here in 5 years when these things crack and have you explain. Okay. Thank you very much, Chanel.
Eugene, others?
Yes, next is Laura Tenenbaum.
Hi, everybody. Chenault, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit because I think that as this Soho is a historic district, I'm curious as to why one of the most damaged Belgian block streets in the historic district is not on this list. And I hope and wonder whether Crosby Street is on a future project because it is unsightly. And I actually had the opportunity, but a friend who was in a wheelchair and I were walking around Soho. I was walking.
If you have questions other than about this,
yes,
what is
it is. And if you stop interrupting us, it'll go a lot faster because you are so rude, Albert. I have no idea what to say. You have interrupted almost every public speaker.
If you have,
if you are so myopic that you only want to talk about the specific aesthetics of the specific application, I really think that you are doing the whole community a disservice. May I continue? I will go as quickly as possible. I know you have a long agenda.
Okay, are there other people who wish to speak?
I have other things to say. What I was speaking about is that this speaks to the aesthetics and the need. she had no trouble crossing most of the Belgian block streets other than Crosby Street. And one spot, which I am very happy to see is on this list, which was at Prince and Mercer, because there's no curb cut there at all. But I agree with the other previous speakers that it was a disaster with what was previously the previous treatment with the same kind of large blocks. I think it really has to be looked at again. The streets are curved, they're small, they're curved, and it hasn't worked in the past. And we have a very sincere concern that it will become unsightly and inappropriate for the landmark district again. I also want to ask, I heard someone note that you will not see paint on the Belgian blocks, although they call them cobblestones. Have you noticed, by the way, that there is paint on Crosby Street on the Belgian blocks? And that is a historic district landmark issue. Thank you. That's my question. Have they noticed that?
That location is not included in any one of our project locations right now, but typically pavement marking does not adhere to cobblestone.
Tell me about it. It's peeling off. It's barely there. People, tourists particularly, there's going to be an accident because it is in such horrible condition. And it has been complained about literally for the 30 years it has not been touched.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why we're installing the granite paver the granite paver crosswalks as we have shown here, because it'll delineate between the roadway surface and the intersection, and also provide a visual pattern as to where individuals should walk and where cars should stop. But there's also DOT signage that would be on the road.
And to your question about why certain intersections haven't been included, our projects are just given to us from DOT. And for the most part, these projects are either, these are the first few that are coming through. So these are some of the areas that really need to be upgraded for whatever, and whether, like you mentioned, there is no curb cut. And so these are the areas where we need to get people off of the street and onto the sidewalk. And then also in some of our other areas, we have to follow the DOT resurfacing schedule. So, so that is why we're not doing an entire area. We're doing specific streets. But it's safe to say that at some point, every single corner in the city that is not compliant will be addressed. I'm not sure when, but they will all be addressed at some point.
Thank you. Eugene, are there others?
Yes, it looks like we have two questions from committee members, Brendan and then Valerie.
Okay.
Hi, I guess, Lindsay, this is a good question for you. Historic granite, there's a plan to remove that in these corners? But you know, they like.
Are you talking about the curb, or are you talking about the cobblestone
sidewalk,
from the roadway?
the sidewalk pavement?
So the sidewalk, if it's currently concrete, then pigmented concrete will be going back. If it's granite, if all the curbs within the historic districts will be New York historic granite curbs, which there's a DOT standard spec for. So it'll match.
Yeah, I meant to say the sidewalk pavement, where there's granite sidewalk pavement, the very large flags.
Oh, so those are basically going to be retained. We're not allowed to rip those out. So those will be reset. If they're broken up in any pieces, you know, if they're not, you know, like a homogeneous nice square, then we'll purchase new pieces that will match, and we'll install those so that we can put in ramps.
Yeah, I mean, they can always be put in a little bit cracked too. There are some that are brilliantly carved and fan out. I'm not sure if any of these are at these locations, but they're very rare. So even if there's a crack, maybe there's a way to just consider patching. I would suggest that might be something to look into.
Yeah,
And
we
then
have
is
it.
there-
We have it. Just to answer your question, we do have in the contract wherever there is granite pavement, that's what we call it. It's to be reset. So if at all possible, unless it's broken up into a lot of pieces, but we do have
Got
to
it.
provide a smooth walking surface. So,
Yes. And then is there a plan to, along with the crosswalks, to set a standard that can be applied also to the granite setters? Because there is no standard now, and what we end up is kind of a hodgepodge of some contractors are filling it with cement, with aggregate. Some are using just straight cement. Some are just filling in with dirt. And so we end up with a situation very uneven and very unsafe. So, and then again, I would just suggest to check in with the London standards or go back to the standards from 1912. There's, books on that. Just to check out the substrate, because I am a little bit concerned about straight onto the cement.
Brendan, could you wrap it up, please, so others can speak?
It's wrapped up.
Okay,
That's all.
Eugene. And lower your hand, please.
Valerie is next.
Thank you. I just like to make a point of order, just for the decorum of this is a public, this is a public hearing, and the public has a right to testify in the form of a statement or a question. I think that forcing every person that testifies even on this committee who wants to speak to get to a question, they may just have a statement they need to make that does not need to be addressed by the presenter. The presenter can choose whether or not to address it. So I just like to point that out because I think that there's some miscommunication happening here. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else of any sort need to speak? Eugene?
I do not see any other questions from the committee or
Okay.
the attendees.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your care in what amounts to historic preservation insofar as it's possible in adapting the historic district to the realities of today. Thank you.
thank you.
And we will simply write a letter in support of the project.
Thank you. Much
You requested.
appreciated.
Thank you.
A little bit different from a resolution that we normally do. The next is 270 Lafayette Street. The application is to install a new storefront infill in one storefront bay on the Lafayette Street facade and two storefront bays along the rear Crosby Street facade.
Yes, I am promoting Jesse Kling to present. There's also someone from the public with their hand raised. Cass Stackelberg. I'm not sure if they are, okay, they need to be promoted.
Thank you.
Great.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and pull up.
Oh, for this, I'm sorry. I thought we were missing a person from the last application. Okay, thank you.
All right.
And looking over the presentation, it seemed to bounce back and forth a lot between the two. As much as you can settle one facade and then the other, I think would make it easier for us to understand.
Yes. Yeah, no, we've updated the presentation, some of the content, and certainly the order of it. And given the timing, I'll try and get through this relatively quickly and share the proposal with you. I'll just let you know that I'll introduce myself. Good to see most of you. Cass Stackelberg of Higgins Quay Sparth and Partners, and I'll be presenting on behalf of our client Hodinky, and we're joined by Chelsea Beeler and Erica Rucci of Hodinkee, and Anthony Simon of Ware Malcolm, who is the the architect of record. He's here to answer any questions that you may have. But hopefully I will do my job and address everything, and there won't be a lot of questions, but I'm happy to take obviously questions at the end. So the project address, Charlotte, as you mentioned, is 270 Lafayette Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District Extension. It is a large 15-story commercial building designed by Sugarman and Berger and completed in 1927. It's one of the later buildings in this district and in the original Soho district. There are only a few buildings from the 1920s of any prominence, this being one of them. And the scope of work is new storefront infill at the base for a new location, a retail location of Dinky, one bay on Lafayette Street and 2 bays on Crosby Street. It's a site plan here. You can generally get a sense of the scale of the building. You all, I'm sure, are familiar with it. It's got about 140 feet of frontage on Lafayette Street, about 85 on Prince Street, and about 150 feet on Crosby, which is really the sort of the back of the building. There are loading docks with the main frontage on Lafayette Street. Some existing condition photographs along Lafayette Street. This is the bay in which we will be doing work. And it's currently infilled with all non-historic material. It's been there for some time, but all non-historic. And you can see in this overall photograph here, there's a range of infill that's been installed, most of it pre-designation, or perhaps all of it pre-designation of the building. But it's all sort of metal and glass, the same finish. There is some continuity, but a bit of variety really around the base of the entire building. A few detailed photographs here and an overall view of Lafayette Street, some detail of the infill, non-historic brick and rusting steel framing, louvers and cement panels up in the transom area. And then a few images, excuse me, of the corner of Prince and Crosby Street as you come around the building. Again, as I said, a variety of infill types, but all more or less the same material and finish. And then coming around to the Crosby Street side, this is looking south down Crosby Street. The building has 2 loading docks historically here, and then a few storefronts here. None of the infill here is historic, similar to the other elevations of the building, and you can see that just sort of the accretions over time, roll down gates, conduit, air conditioning units sort of punched through the transoms, and the effort is to install a new compatible storefront infill, taking cues from the historic, which I'll show you in just a minute through the documentation. Also, details here on Crosby Street of the infill, also these brick panels. Historically, these were granite, but they're now brick roll down gates. And this really very nice decorative spandrel panel, which separates the first and second floors. It's really the only remaining historic material on the lower register of the building. Some historic photographs of the building, the 1940s tax photo, of course, here on the left, and a zoomed in view of it on the upper right. It appears that there was an Oldsmobile showroom at the corner. There was this very large projecting bracket sign and perhaps even a clock or some sort of object sign hanging off of this armature. And what's interesting is you can begin to see that even by 1940, about 13 years after the building's construction, there was already a fair amount of variety around the base of the building. Likely, as tenants came in, they adopted different infill types and signage, and you can see that early on in the building's history. And then a photograph here from 2010, when the building was designated as part of the district extension, and the infill that is in place today was there at least as far back as 2010. I'm turning around to the Crosby Street side, tax photos here on the left and a detail of the tax photo here on the right. And what you can see in these images is that historically it looks like the infill was just a simple metal and glass storefront system, very thin, small profiles. Signage was really, it doesn't appear to have been accounted for. So you can see, hopefully you can make this out on your screens, but there's a sign panel that tenant just sort of stuck over the decorative spandrel panel, which is not exactly a great detail. And we've come up with we think a far better detail of integrating a sign band in the new storefront infill. And I'll also just point out here, it appears that there were stone bases, probably granite, across the base of these storefronts with these large plate glass windows. And the two images on the right, also from the time of designation in 2010, showing similar infill and roll down gates that exist today. So a quick rendering to illustrate what is proposed. So this is a rendering, this large image with an inset of the existing image here. And so the concept here is to really install a clean, transparent storefront system, granite bulkheads at 18 inches, large plate glass windows, a channel here, a C channel with small dimensional letters of 8 inches in height, and a multi-light transom above. And this spandrel, this transom here, sort of does double duty. It carries the signage, but it also hides a roll down gate that's really important to the client, to the tenant, for security purposes. So that hides the gate, which rolls up behind here, and you'll see that in our drawings and the sections in particular. And then on Crosby Street, again, the existing photo here, similar to what you saw before, and the new infill here. So a typical storefront infill here, similar to what's on Lafayette Street, double doors, large plate glass window, granite bulkhead, signage, and a transom, again, masking the roll down gate that's behind it, and the multi-light transom above. And then in this bay, louvers that are going to be providing fresh air for the mechanical systems of the building, of the store, the roll down gates behind here, storefront window, granite bulkhead. Also, just point out this bay behind this glass panel, and we're proposing just a back painted glass panel here, is a building stair, and you can see it continues up these open stair landings. This is an egress stair for the building, and you'll see in plan that it sort of intrudes into this storefront bay. So we're just proposing to back paint this glass. Otherwise, you just see the block wall that encloses the stair. And as I said, you'll see that in a moment in plan. So an existing plan here on the left and a proposed plan. So this is that building stair, and so you can see how the enclosure really intrudes on the storefront bay, and that's an existing building feature that has been there since the 1920s. So in the proposed, the main entry will be on Lafayette Street, double doors, recessed. All the existing doors are in swing currently, which doesn't meet egress code. So these main doors here on Lafayette and Crosby Street will be out swinging doors. So new infill on Lafayette and storefront bays on Crosby. And the main entries will be here, and then a secondary egress here as part of this backspace for the store, and then the building stair here. An existing elevations, along Lafayette Street here, and existing along Crosby here, and then proposed just showing the new infill in those particular bays, the one bay on Lafayette Street and the two bays on Crosby. Similar detailing on both. Obviously, there's meant to be a consistency from one side to the other, similar to the way we think the infill was done historically. Existing view of the detail elevation on Lafayette Street and proposed on Lafayette. Again, this is a material sample. There's a dark granite panel proposed here, a bulkhead panel. It's 18 inches in height, and then tall kick plates at the bottom of the steel and glass doors. The whole system, the whole storefront system, is proposed to be a painted steel. It's an antique bronze finish, sort of a dark, rich bronze color painted onto the steel. All the framing elements will be done in steel. And then these are just simple, and you'll see this in a detail, 8-inch letters, white painted letters with a LED light behind it. So it's an opaque letter that will just have a very faint halo glow behind it. Some sections, again, this is the roll down gate with that spandrel or transom bar here, as I described, signage mounted onto the front face of that. This is the door recessed back. And then this is a section through the storefront window with the granite bulkhead and the roll down gate assembly above, with a clear glass transom above that. Some additional details. It's a simple steel framing system, simple steel sill, granite bulkhead, and really sort of meant to sort of replicate the dimensionality and simplicity of that historic storefront that we saw in the tax photo a few slides back. On Crosby Street, the two bays currently on Crosby, as I mentioned, filled with non-historic infill currently. And the proposal, as I detailed in the rendering, large storefront windows, channel up here, only signage on this bay, on the north bay, louvers above the infill on the south bay, and clear transom windows on the north bay. Also, just point out, and you'll see this in a moment in section, we're proposing just a simple clock mounted onto the stone pier, 24 inches in diameter, about a 30-inch projection off the pier, and you'll see that in section in just a moment. Similar detailing here, roll down gates. The security concerns are very important to our client, particularly on the Crosby Street side, which, as you all know, is somewhat untraveled or less traveled, let's say, certainly than Lafayette Street, with the infill recessed and a simple steel and glass storefront system. This section here shows the clock. As I mentioned, it's just a white metal face with black letters, small letters on the face of the clock that just say Hodinky. Those will be about 3 inches in height, and then the roll down gates obscured by the spandrels. We included this slide just it's sort of fun, and I think it's good to see and remember that this district, particularly along Broadway, but also along Lafayette Street, historically. There was quite a bit of signage, but there are these interesting sort of object signs that one sees. Clocks here. This is a little further down on Broadway, 177 Broadway, but this feature, this pipe here at 515 Broadway, and then of course the signage at the corner of Lafayette and Prince Street as part of 270 Lafayette Street. So we think that the clock is a sort of a feature that one sees in the district, would have seen at least historically in the district, and it's just simple in design, and will provide the time for those passersby. So this is a detail simply mounted, sort of more similar to a bracket sign really, but also serves as a clock. It's a 3-inch width and a 24-inch diameter. Some additional details. Again, I mentioned these C channels above the storefronts will hold the dimensional letters. These are just white painted metal letters, 8 inches in height. And behind the letter will be just a low output LED. So there'll just be sort of a glow in the evenings on this back panel. The dimensional letters are not illuminated. It's really the channel itself that is illuminated both on Lafayette and Crosby. And then just returning back to the renderings that you saw before. So, contemporary infill, but taking its cues from the historic, which was a simple, slender metal and glass system with granite bulkhead. That's how we're detailing this. A lot of transparency into the space through these large plate glass windows. Again, it's similar to what was there. Louvers up in the transom that are going to provide the necessary air intakes for the mechanical systems. The clock mounted onto the pier, and then on Lafayette Street, again, similar infill type, simple signage, and compatible infill with the building's history and character. I'd be happy to take any questions you all may have.
Thank you. The letters, I want to be clear, the LED is behind them. They're that provide the halo light.
Right. The letters are metal, painted metal.
Right. Okay. And the question of bronze painting on the steel.
Yes.
Where is that throughout?
Throughout, yeah. So it's the finish, we're referring to it as an antique bronze, but that's the paint on top of it, on the steel.
Right. So what we see is antique bronze.
Right. Right.
Okay. Thank you. Eugene.
Yes. Bill Riccobono.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Cass, I don't know if you know, but there is a similar clock on the Mercer Hotel, and I support street clocks. I think it's appropriate, and I like the project. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bob.
Brian, I think you're next.
Okay, thank you. Great presentation, Cass. Is Hodinky store, is that a watch store?
Yes. Yes. So Hodinkee, if you don't know, they're a resource for modern and vintage wristwatches. They've been around since 2008, and really since 2012, they've had retail locations, but all things horological.
Okay, well, that makes sense then for the clock on the wall. So I thought that the Crosby Street facades were more successful than the Lafayette side, simply because on Crosby there's more uniformity. It seems to fit in much more with its neighbors than on the Lafayette side. It's just one store that's different than all the other stores. And I know that you've tried very hard to pull on historic precedent, but you don't see that in the illustrations because there's nothing like it anywhere else on Lafayette. Would you not agree?
So there's actually at least 2 or 3 infill types right now on Lafayette, and I think this photo sort of illustrates it. So there's this type. There's actually, let me just run up to the, and I can zoom in on this, but this is part of the issue, you know, both in the, I think in the historic condition and in the current condition. So this is sort of one type. This is another type. The La Colombe infill is another type. And then these 3 are sort of more similar to this, but currently there are 3 different infill types across Lafayette Street alone. And similarly on Prince Street, there are 2 or 3 different types. So there's already quite a bit of variety that exists across the base of the building.
So why wouldn't you try to match one of those that are predominating on Lafayette?
So I think there are a few considerations. One, it's just an aluminum system, which I think the client sort of doesn't prefer. There's also sort of the roll down, all these bays down here have roll down gates that are just mounted from the ceiling, and they occupy the full height of the infill. And that wasn't preferred. And we think that our detail, having that channel masking the roll down gate, is actually a much preferable detail. And it's just, you know, it's a particular design for Hodinkee, and we think it's, you know, compatible with the building's character and appropriate for the building and its district.
So you mentioned the roll down gates. I noticed that on Crosby Street, they are on the outside of the frames or windows and door. But
Right.
on the Lafayette side, they're on the inside. So the plate glass is still exposed to the street, correct?
Right, there are sort of differing concerns about security on the 2 streets.
Okay, well, all right, that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Albert.
Yes, on Crosby Street, the 2 bays are considerably different, the effect of them. The one on the, is that south or?
This is
right.
south. Yeah.
On the south is all very, very dark. And the one on the north is all very, very light. I wonder if there's anything that could be done to make this less obvious.
So are you talking about the exterior storefront or the interior?
No, we don't deal with interiors. I'm questioning the, in particular, the area that you said was louvers, I believe.
Right, across here, yes.
Which is very commanding.
So, you know, I think
that is necessary. Could you explain why?
Why the louvers are necessary?
Yes.
They're providing heating and cooling for the space. There's no other. I mean, there's a window air conditioner in this space right now. There's no conditioned space. There's no conditioned air in the space currently, and that's a code requirement to provide conditioned space. So that
is not true of the north section?
Well, these are all connected internally, so there will be ductwork. The mechanical units behind the louvers, and there'll be ductwork on the ceiling, distributing air conditioning and heating, etc., fresh air.
Okay, I just think it's very striking, and I was wondering if there was any way to mitigate it. Thank you.
So, okay, yes. I mean, I have to say, we didn't want to spread the louvers over multiple storefronts. This is the right spot for, concentrating mechanicals, especially on Crosby Street, and not having them on Lafayette Street, which really is a primary elevation. This is sort of the working side of the building, let's say, where the loading docks are. And this is a fairly typical way of handling air intake, et cetera, for buildings that don't have, mechanical systems on an upper roof or something like that. This space is isolated, and for what it's worth, the landmark staff rules allow for the insertion of louvers, into transoms at staff level. It's obviously, we're presenting it as part of this project, but it's sort of that common that it's actually, incorporated into the staff rules of landmarks.
Okay, another question that really doesn't concern us. The main entrance to the building is on Lafayette or Crosby?
Yes, Lafayette.
Lafayette. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Albert. Anita?
Oh, yes, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on Albert's comment. I don't think anybody is, I understand the necessity of the louver, but I think what's behind the question is, does it have to be painted a heavy black?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the issue. It's the visual, not necessarily the actual material. So I just wanted to put that into the discussion.
I suppose it could be painted a lighter color, but then you're seeing the louvers, then they become a much more prominent feature of the facade, which I'm not sure is better. I mean, I think the other thing, let me actually run up to the elevation, because I think one thing that doesn't show in the rendering is that there will be sort of framing around them. So they'll be sort of set behind a frame, so they won't be the sort of continuous horizontal louver, one consistent louver, but they'll be broken up in the same manner as the transom. But it's
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Anita. And Brendan?
Thanks, Kaz. That was really smart and good. Question about the roll down gate. I really admire that solution, and I just am wondering about the Landmarks Preservation Commission's preference for interior gates, and just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Right.
Maybe you've already gone through the staff and gotten that approved.
Well, they actually, I mean, this has been part of the proposal for some time, and the staff has obviously reviewed this proposal. They haven't commented on that, and I think the staff rules, we don't deal with a lot of roll down gates actually as part of applications, and I think this one handles it, I think, in a pretty thoughtful way. But I think the staff rules actually allow for either detail where, I'll just go to the section where either the roll down gate is coming down in front of the storefront, but the housing itself is hidden, but that the gate can be deployed in front of the glass or behind it. But this is, it's the existing condition has the housing just jammed onto the outside of the existing storefront. So this is, this brings it to the inside.
Yeah, it's a great solution. Thanks for the presentation.
Thanks. Sure.
Great. Brian, do you have your hand up again, or is that from before?
All right, that's from before.
Okay. Then we have one question from the public so far, Pete Davies. And if there are any other people from the public, please raise your hand. But go ahead, Pete.
Okay, thank you. could you put up slide number 8, which is the historical condition on Crosby? Yeah, the photo on the left, the tax photo.
Yes.
My question is about the bulkhead, what we call the bulkhead, the solid from the sidewalk up to the window.
Yes.
Historically, that is larger than what is being proposed. Right now, the vocabulary of the building along Crosby Street, pretty much in every bay that has a window, is for that higher bulkhead. You guys are proposing to drop it down to 18 inches. I'm not sure what that existing is, but it's 18 inches definitely lower. I think that starts bringing the Crosby Street vocabulary, the Lafayette Street vocabulary onto Crosby, and it seems somewhat inappropriate. So I would suggest that that go up higher. Question about the clock. Is there any internal illumination in the clock?
None. No, it's a metal face.
Okay. And
Yeah.
do you have any plans for LED screens inside?
No.
Okay.
No, and if I could just address the bulkhead issue, I think, it's interesting. I've been doing this now for a long time, and 18 inches is a pretty standard height particularly for buildings at this age. So you all are well familiar with, the Soho sort of model, which has a much higher sill typically. Often there was a platform and then the storefront windows above. So, that sill height was much higher. But buildings, particularly in the 1920s, where retailing and ground floor commercial systems, collier systems came in, the bulkheads were typically much lower, in the 18 to maybe 24 inches. But I think this is aligning basically with this sort of lower course of the pier, and just going down to sort of what we're proposing. We may be a couple inches off of that compared to what was there, but it's considerably higher than what exists elsewhere on the building. Just sort of pointing out, this is this brick bulkhead, which doesn't have anything to do with anything. But right now on Lafayette Street in particular, there's basically like a maybe 12 inches at this end, and then as you get down here, actually it slopes down here. It's about 12 inches on this end. And it's less as you come uphill on Lafayette. So we're considerably higher actually with that granite bulkhead than what you see elsewhere on, some of these don't even have bulkheads. So considerably higher, and it's granite, which is going back to the historic material. So we think it's the right height for the building.
Okay, I agree with you that on Lafayette it's appropriate. I think on Crosby, which is a much more industrial look, that it's more appropriate to have the bulkier, heavier situation. But thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more question from the public. Laura, go ahead.
I'll be quick. I was going to talk about the bulkhead too. So I agree with Pete on that for Crosby Street. I think that the idea of a clock is great, particularly that it's not lit. I'm concerned, and I'm glad to see that somewhat a business that advertises right now that it's a pop-up and that location is going to be staying. I wonder if there's any way they can do away with the large advertising that they have right now in those windows that show in your photographs, which I believe are a landmarks violation. And that's all that I have to say or ask.
Well, those, as soon as this gets approved, the store is going to be built out. There'll be a barricade in front of the store, and it will, the signs will eventually go away.
Yeah, but it should never have been.
Well, okay. They will be going away. Promise.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Chanel, I don't see any other questions from the committee members or the public at this time. Chenault?
I'm sorry, I'm so conscious about everybody keeping their mics off. Thank you, Cass, if you're still here. We'll
Yes.
hear Charles Street now. 52 Charles Street, applications to construct a rear yard addition and a small rooftop addition.
So it's me again. So I'm going to just stay on and present
Oh,
that project as well.
we've met the applicant. Thank you.
I don't even need to get up from my seat. Let me share my screen with this presentation. Sorry, let me get to the. Give me just a moment here. Okay. Terrific. Just switching gears. Very good. Once again, Cass Stackelberg. I'm joined by my colleague Jesse Kling from Higgins Quaysbarth. And I'm going to run through the presentation, but the design architect, Michael Schmidt, is on the call. Hopefully he is been promoted to panelist also. And so I'll run through the presentation and either I'll answer questions or Mike will answer questions depending on the nature of the questions. As Chanel, as you mentioned, 52 Charles Street is located in the Greenwich Village Historic District, illustrated here at the center of the photograph and highlighted in pink here on the south side of Charles Street. And it runs just west of 7th Avenue South. And we include this map, and you'll see others in a moment, because I think the context of this block, and you can see the outline of the original block and really how the cutting of the subway and the running of 7th Avenue South literally bisected this block in half. And I think what you'll see is that this context is actually quite different than many obviously buildings to the west that are sort of, or blocks to the west where there are sort of unified blocks, but even some of the other blocks to the north and south that have a little bit more integrity to them. This block in particular has been impacted significantly by the cutting of the subway. The scope of work includes a thorough restoration of the front facade, a small setback a penthouse on the roof, and a rear yard extension, which you'll see actually is consistent with both historic extensions in this row as well as commission approved extensions over the past 10 years. The building was constructed in 1840. It was part of an original row of 5 houses. All 5 are legible on the street. Let me give you just an aerial view to give you a little bit of context before we turn to the street views. But 52 is noted here. The rest of the row, there are two buildings to the west, so 54 and 56 are the other 2 on the west side of the original row, and then 50 and 48. And what you can see here, sort of this now is turned around from that Sanborn map, but 7th Avenue cutting that original block in half. And the recently completed building here on 7th Avenue, these buildings in the original row have been extended already. This building here, 48, actually was built this deep, and our proposal is to extend the back of 52 to align with these 2 of its neighbors. I'll also point out that the block itself, obviously it's very exposed. There are views into the middle of the block, which is unusual, but comes about with the cutting of the avenue. And it's also quite irregular and dense. So you have this new apartment structure here. There are back buildings, which you'll see in plan and in photographs. So there's a real density already in the back of this block. So a view across the original row, 56, 54, our project address is 52, 50 and 48. And you get a sense of the continuity of the row, although of course, studio windows cut into and through the cornice on 48 and 50. The replacement windows at 52 and the painting of the cornice. And really what's, with a project, this is a rendered view. With this project, this is going to be the effect on the district. I think this is really important to keep in mind, that there will be a comprehensive restoration of the front facade. And that's really what you're going to sort of experience as you're walking down Charles Street. I think that's a key component of the work that our client is taking on with the project and the restoration components. So we want to show you that, and then as you come around the block, just giving you a sense of sort of what the quote unquote block front is on 7th Avenue. So excuse me, this is 46 Charles. This was reconstructed and built in 1921 after the cutting of the subway. This building, which I mentioned, it was completed maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and then these sort of infill structures that exist now fronting onto 7th Avenue. And then as you move south down 7th Avenue, this is the existing view. 52 Charles is here, 54, which has a historic extension, 56, which has a commission-approved extension, and 48 here, which also has a historic extension. And the proposal, which is to basically bring the back of the house out so it aligns with the two buildings directly west, railings, a couple roof chimney extensions, and then a small penthouse on the roof that you'll see is actually set back both from the front and rear facades, but also from the east parapet to allow for FDNY clear access across the roof, thereby negating anything like railings or anything on the roof. You'll see a little bit more about that in just a moment. Some historic photographs. This is 1914 looking west across Charles Street. So you can see what remained of the original row of 5 after the corner buildings were cut prior to the cutting of the subway. And you can see that, in 1914, those studio windows had not been cut into the cornice, and there's some continuity obviously clear in this photograph. And then by the tax photo in 1940, those studio windows had been cut, and you can see the balance of the row. But clearly continuity in the alignment of the windows, the cornice line, and the porticos and enfranements at the low stoops. Historic map from 1911 on the left and 1916 on the right, sort of pre and post subway cut. Again, where you see really the bisecting of this block, and the fact that the back of the lot and its adjacent lots as part of the row become sort of have frontage now on 7th Avenue. Going back a bit in time, just to sort of see the evolution of the row. So this is the Paris Fire Insurance Atlas from 1854, and these are the 5 buildings in the original row with 52 at the center. So 48. The easternmost building was built with a full height brick extension here. And this is a detail of that same map. So it looks like there were maybe wooden extensions off the back of these buildings. But 48 on the far right of the row, ignore the numbering, they renumbered the buildings on the block. But the building originally had, 48 had a full height extension. By 1859, again, this is the 1859 map and a detail here, 56 now has, 54 has also gained an extension, a full height extension. So historically, these buildings began to be extended. And so in thinking about the appropriateness of our proposal to extend the back of 52 to align with 54, I think one of the things that's interesting is what we're proposing we see as an appropriate change. These are changes that occurred historically, but also under commission regulation. So I think tapping into building evolutions that occurred in the 19th century, and again what we're proposing here, I think allows for that appropriate change. Some later maps, 1911 here on the top and 1955 on the bottom, the overall, and then the detail on the right. Again, you can see now the extension here at 54 and the original one at 48. And then you can also begin to see here in the 1950s map, the effect of the cutting of the subway and the sort of creation of these irregular lots and these frontages now, these clipped corners fronting onto 7th Avenue. These 2 photos are from 1916, sort of just as subway construction was starting. Sorry, it's the same photo. This is the overall, and then this is the detail view. So this is 48 that had the original full height extension, and then the backs of 52 and 50 still had its wood extension off the back, and that had come off at some point here at 50. So the other thing that came about, and it's interesting along this stretch of 7th Avenue, as you all may know, is as buildings became exposed, the rear elevations became exposed, some of these buildings were redesigned and reconstructed, the rear elevations of these buildings. so that no longer necessarily were, as here on in our row, just these simple rear elevations in brick. There were instances where they were reconstructed in a completely different vocabulary. This sort of colonial revival expression here on Commerce Street, and this Mediterranean or sort of almost mission style on Barrow Street. So looking at this, we're taking cues from that idea, because now that the building is going to have some prominence at 52 Charles is going to have some prominence, we're looking to integrate a little bit more architecture onto the back. It's still secondary and simply designed, but as you'll see, sort of this idea of sort of reorienting these buildings and giving them two elevations, two finished elevations, is something that we were particularly interested in. So turning now back to the existing conditions. So again, 52 Charles is highlighted here in the middle, and you can see the extension, the historic extension from the 1850s here at 54, a commission approved extension now at 56, and the infill that exists at 50 and 48. Some existing photos. This is looking at the back of 52 Charles Street. It is an unarticulated rear facade. There isn't even really a corbelled cornice or parapet. There's just a gutter that runs across the back. Very pedestrian, utilitarian. And then a view from the roof looking into the rear yard. Really no significant architectural features. And then you see the sort of sheer wall here of the new building, that triangular shaped building just to the south. So as I mentioned, there's quite a bit of density on this block. So there are back buildings of 3 and 4 stories immediately to the west. And then you can see the backs of 54 and 56, which were part of the original row and were extended out. And so what we're proposing is to align the back of 52 with the back of these two buildings. The top floor windows will match. There'll be 6 over 6 windows. They'll align across the top, as will the brick parapet above. A few additional photos, just looking at the context. This is the back here of 50 Charles Street, with the restaurant that extends to 7th Avenue South, and mechanical equipment there. And then looking west, just to see the density of the infill in the center of the lot. Just highlighting a couple of these commission approvals. I mentioned this in 2008, the back of this building was extended out to align with 54. The top floor has double hung windows that are consistent with the windows, the historic masonry openings at the back of the adjacent building. And then obviously at the lower floors, the commission was more flexible in terms of the fenestration and the infill, but continuity across the top floor, which we are proposing. And then at 54, back in 2016, there was an application for a full width rooftop addition at 54, which was approved. And we just highlight this and illustrate this from that presentation. That hasn't been constructed, but we note that the commission did find it appropriate for a visible rooftop addition on the building directly to the west. Turning to the proposed work, so this is an existing site plan, figure ground, and then proposed. So we're proposing to build out to align with the back of these buildings, and then this is the rooftop addition, which you can see set back 6 feet from the east parapet and about 10 to 12 feet back from the street facade. An axonometric view of that. The blue is the new construction. Chimney increases in height, which are very modest. And then ghosted in is the addition that was approved directly to the west here in this image. So looking at the existing and proposed street elevations, this is the Charles Street elevation that exists today with these simple 1/1 aluminum windows and the proposed 6 over 6 windows. And then you can see this modest addition up on the roof. Again, because we are providing a 6-foot clear space alongside the addition, there's no need for the fire department access to go up and over this, and thereby requiring chimneys. So this, requiring railings. So this is just a very simple low slung addition. We have to raise this chimney by 1 foot and these chimneys by about 3 feet, although they're set further back. They're minimally visible, and we've mocked those up, and I'll show those to you in just a moment. On the rear elevation, this is the rear elevation currently, and then the proposed, as I mentioned, 6 over 6 double hung windows in line with the adjacent. And then we're proposing just a very small sort of bay, sort of 2-story, 3-story bay window clad in a standing seam metal with a gray sort of zinc colored finish with multi-light double hung windows here, the penthouse here, and then just a simple railing with a black or dark gray finish on the upper roof. Side elevations showing the chimneys ganged together and clad in similar standing seam material similar to the back. All the interventions will have a similar cladding, a standing seam gray finish, which will all sort of speak of the same era and intervention. And then sections. So this is a section through the existing building. This tall chimney ties into fireplaces and flues in the existing building, and those are being decommissioned. So this will come down. These chimneys, there are 4. We're going to be using the 2 southernmost ones, but those need to be raised. So you can see those here. Those are being raised 3 feet above the chimney. The penthouse. And basically, the extension is this portion here off the back of the house, about 18 feet off the back of the house. And then the little bay, the bay window here. We're proposing to excavate just 2 feet in the rear portion of the cellar. Currently, the cellar is 6 feet 3 inches in height. We're proposing to retain that height near the street, but to lower it about 1'11" to the south. And then here you can see the penthouse set back 15 feet from the front facade. Low scale mechanical equipment sitting on the street side, and then an open terrace here on the south side of the penthouse. The rear yard will not be excavated, and there'll be a deep planting bed beyond the garden. You'll see that in plan in just a moment. Comparative sections, so existing on the left and proposed on the right. Basically, all the floor joists and the floor structure will remain in the original portion of the house, and then we're just lowering it here and putting in new structure, obviously as part of the rear extension. And then floor plans, I can go through these quickly. The cellar, as I mentioned, the front portion is going to remain unexcavated, and then this back portion will be dropped by about 2 feet with underpinning on either side. And then as you go up, this is the basement level with the extension, a planting area at the back of the lot, 6.5 feet, a little more than 6.5 feet, and then just a rear yard here between the planting area in the back of the house. Continuing up the house, this is the parlor level, front parlor, dining room, and a living room off the back. Bedrooms directly above. Here you can see here at the second floor. And then just to go up to the roof. So I'll just stop here for a minute. So you can see the scale of the penthouse, quite modest, setback 15 feet from the front and nearly 19 feet off the back. And it's this 6-foot clearance off of the east parapet that allows for fire department access from front to back. So the roof can just be a simple pitched roof. It doesn't need railings, which would sort of add additional visibility to the proposal. But we've made this smaller so that we could eliminate any of the ladders and things that you see that require access up and over a penthouse. Mechanical equipment, as I mentioned, will be low and situated in this corner of the roof and really sort of at the level of the parapet or below. I mentioned that we have to raise a few chimneys. There are existing flues that are visible. So what you'll see here, this is the overall view here and the detailed view here. These are existing, chimneys. Those will be reconfigured, and this is the new height of the existing one. So it's almost a 1-for-1 swap on this is on the east side. These are chimneys at 50 Charles Street. And then looking back in the opposite direction, if you're standing out in front of the restaurant Morandi, there's this sort of moment where you can see the chimney extensions that are proposed on the west side of the building. So that's here and then shown in zoom photo here. So these are the existing chimneys that you saw and flues that you saw in the previous photograph. And these are the mocked up extensions. And then this is the chimney extensions on the west side. And I think, I think this photograph is sort of telling, you all know this better than anybody, but exposed chimneys and flues are almost a sort of character defining feature of the district. You see them sort of when you look across the streetscape, just in this photo, you've got one here, you've got a brick chimney here and a metal flue here. Obviously this prominent chimney on the new building. And then just across this row, you see, this sort of varying heights of chimneys across the roofscape. And then finally, just returning back to the existing view here and the proposed view here on Charles Street. As I said, as part of the overall project, there's a comprehensive program of restoration across the street facade. And that's really going to be the main effect on this sort of historic portion of the district, this sort of a restored facade knit back into this historic row of 5 houses. And then on the back, an existing view here and our rendered view here, again, extending the building so it aligns with its neighbors, the 2 buildings to the west, which historically and under commission review have been extended. We propose to align with that extension. And then this modest addition on the roof with the railings and the chimney extensions visible above the infill that occurred sort of following the subway construction. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question about the rear facade before we go on, please. With this picture, actually.
Yes.
The steel and glass window levels are not visible from any thoroughfare. Is that what we're seeing? The bay that extends off the lower floors is just visible here. It's rendered very dark, but it's a multi-light double hung window. Does that answer your question? And all the rest then is not visible from anywhere. And
right.
And the penthouse not at all from the front and clearly from
the back. We mocked that up and you cannot see it. No.
Okay. Fine. The committee, please.
Hi, Brian.
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation. And I agree that I went over there and saw nothing of the mock-up from Charles Street.
And you're tall, Brian. That's good. That's helpful.
Especially when I'm on my bike, Anyway, so things are looking good. I would say that I'm just wondering on the rear extension, I like the windows and so forth, and the railings seem to match with the neighbors. I commend you that you are matching up with the extensions to the west. But then you do the bay extension on top of that. And that's a little troubling for me. It's not only a bay, which pops out further from the other facades, but it's a very large window, as you know, and a large glazed opening. So I'm just wondering, what's the necessity of the bay rather than just putting the fenestration into that facade?
Right. So I hate to punt a tough question to the architect, but I might have Michael Schmidt, if he is on the call, answer the question. But I'll also just sort of point out that the sort of varying articulation, both of the buildings, the 2 buildings to the west. I think the commission under that review sort of saw variety as being sort of an acceptable element. And I think just, looking at those historic examples a bit to the south, where you have this sort of great variety of different architectural languages, whether it's bays or sort of colonial revival, I think the backs of these buildings can sort of take some kind of variety. But with that, in terms of plan and general sort of layouts, I'll let Michael, if he's on the call, respond to the question about the inclusion of the bay. I'm wondering, maybe he needs to be promoted, Eugene, to a panelist, Michael Schmidt.
Yes, let me promote him. Go ahead.
Great.
There he is.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, Michael Schmidt is promoted.
No, I'm here. Sorry, it went out and went back in when you promoted me to the panel. So the question is, why did we put the bay window on the rear? The reason for that, we were actually allowed by rear yard setback codes to even go further into the rear yard, and obviously we didn't want to do that with the historic alignment of the additions along the back. And we felt as Cass had mentioned, there is a historical precedence that these facades aren't just rear yard facades any longer. I mean, there's a large, whatever, 12 or 15-story building right behind it, and then this one-story full extension. And so you see some of that on the 7th Avenue facade, and it is quite visible from 7th Avenue. And we felt like it was actually okay to provide this bay window. We didn't want to take it to the top floor because we felt the most important thing for the rear facades is that continuity of windows along the back and the continuity of the material, which we are replicating what's next to us for the facade. But we felt like the bay window also was an opportunity to suggest that this is a partially exposed facade and always probably will be. And it allowed us to gain a little bit more square footage within our plan, not very much, very modest. I think we came out 2 feet or 1.5 feet. But we also felt it was a good architectural feature given the dichotomy of this facade being a rear facade, but very exposed to the street.
Thank you.
And what is the depth of this bay window?
It's about 2 feet. It's a 2 feet extension, and it goes from the ground, from the yard level to the top of the 3rd floor. It doesn't go along the top floor.
Okay. Is that all the questions you have?
No, we have Albert.
Okay, of the next person, fine.
About the visibility from 7th Avenue South over Agave, they're fully visible. Could you describe the fence once again?
The railing?
The railing?
Yeah.
The railing.
Yeah, Mike, do you want to respond?
Well, the railing, we tried to minimize the visual impact of the railing as much as possible. So it's a simple steel framed railing, and our thinking was to put the cables, which are very, very lightweight, in between each of the vertical frames to lessen its impact. And as Cass said, we did a lot of studying because we know this is a very visible view of the back of our building. We did a lot of studies with the railing, with how to reduce physical height of the roof. There's an elevator, but we stopped the elevator a floor below. We adjusted floors lower so that the elevator overrun would not impact the level that we needed to go. And the big issue was many studies on the bulkhead, which includes a room and stair and a bathroom to the roof. Of eventually arriving at the solution of the 6-foot wide pathway from front to back, which did 2 things. It allowed this, it really minimized the volume of the bulkhead, and it also allowed us not to have to put railings or any mechanical equipment on the top of it, which really looked too tall when we did an initial rendering of that.
Okay, and none of the I didn't, unlike Brian, I did not get on a bike and go look at it. Nothing is visible from Charles Street, right? All those chimneys and so forth.
The only thing that's visible on Charles are the chimney extensions, which are 1 foot on one side and about 3 feet on the other, but none of the habitable space is visible.
Okay. Okay, and just back to that railing again, it's painted black.
Either a dark gray or black. We don't want it to stand out too strong. We want it to kind of flow with the rest of the texture of the rooftops.
And it is metal. Is it steel or
steel?
Whatever?
There's steel frames, and then we can do black cables in between the frames.
I doubt that there will ever be a high rise where Agave is. So it will remain visible. Thank you.
Chenault, I don't see any other questions at this time from either.
Okay, I have two of mine. On the front, this is a bit of a mechanical question. The only noticeable change is changing the windows to 6/6. Is that correct? Or
That's
are they,
correct. Yes.
they're not already 6/6?
They were
No, they're
originally.
1/1.
But they
Oh,
were
they are.
originally, and then there were really,
And,
there were infill windows.
And could we see the rendering of the rear facade?
Yeah, as Michael said, we're going to match the brick off the rear to the historic brick directly adjacent. So sort of further emphasizing that continuity across the back.
No, it's the rendering I'm asking for.
The elevation.
That's the elevation, or this is the
Yeah,
rendering?
I'm sorry, the elevation, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It was that's what shows it clearly, right? There was. I say we just don't see the bayness of the window on this. Okay, I was confused there. Fine.
Yeah, and you can see in this, actually, you can see the equipment on the adjacent roof. So, you're only going to see from about this level up.
Yeah,
from 7th Avenue.
From the 7th Avenue side.
Right.
My comment is on the railing. There's one, perhaps it's on Charles Street straight along. Anyway, this kind of system in general is not invisible. It somehow seems modern to have these cables stretched along, and a simple metal railing, as we've asked for in other situations, and as much metal of a modest width as required, just does not have such a contemporary feeling about it. And it's the one element that we see that's going to look non-historically informed, if you will. Okay, that's all about question. Any other people at all wish to speak? Okay, thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marathon.
Last one tonight, I promise.
Next is 2 items for discussion. Because the nature of this, we're not coming up with a resolution. There is not an application before us in connection with it. The result will be to formulate a statement from the committee or from the board about these 2 items. The first one, I'm sorry, we need to reverse the order of them from what's written. So we'll do number 5 first. The proposal by the mayor for cooperation between Landmarks Preservation Commission and the Department of Buildings to ensure the safety and preservation of landmark buildings. For these 2, we'd like to take first the comments from the public, if there are any on this, and then we will go through an outline that's been, well, no outline's been prepared. We go through the topic with the committee and in one case with a guest. So are there members of the public who wish to speak about the Landmarks Preservation Commission and Department of Buildings?
Yes, we have one question so far from the public.
Could everyone who has a question on or a comment on this, please raise your hands so we see.
Okay, so we have 2 questions from the public.
Okay, fine.
First will be Laura Tenenbaum, and then second will be Pete Davies.
Before I say this, I just want to clarify because I had walked away from the computer, so I didn't catch the beginning. This is the discussion of the LPC, of the new rules for the LPC for staff level.
No, we're doing the other one first. We're doing
Oh, I'm
number
sorry.
5 first.
I don't know enough about the other one to comment, so
Okay. We'll come back to you.
I'll come back.
Pete?
So there wasn't a link to any information about this, right? I'm just not clear what this is.
It
the
is,
substance of
in
what
view of
we're
all the, this is not the official word, this is a summary of what we understand it to be. There have been instances and dramatic ones, particularly in the village, of buildings simply being, in one case, had to be completely razed because of work that was done, and it was all terribly involved with the city and the buildings department and the landmark commission's treating of the building. This is an attempt to coordinate the two agencies together in order to ensure that buildings are not do not come to a state of having to be taken down, or even not so dramatic.
Is it just a concept or is it actual language that?
Well, we don't know enough yet. We're addressing it tonight because we want the board to have a position going forward with whatever public testimony there is and interagency testimony.
Well, we're in the same boat, and I support what you're trying to do.
Well, thank you. Okay, can you make Dana a panelist?
Who?
She's going to speak about this.
Oh, yes.
That was all of the public, right?
That was all of the public, although Valerie had her hand raised as well.
Well, we're coming to the, yeah.
Okay.
But
All
we
right.
first want to do the village preservation representative.
Yes, hello. Good evening. This is my first community board 2 meeting, so thank you for having me.
And we welcome you.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Glad to be here and to join you all in the future as well. My name is Dina Tasswinter, and I'm the new Director of Preservation and Research at Village Preservation. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to give a little statement on behalf of Village Preservation. So further to what you were all just saying about this kind of vague announcement that was given, we wanted to share our thoughts. So while some of the general points that were made in the announcement are definitely a step in the right direction and include elements of the proposal that we and other preservation and community groups advocated for, we felt that the announcement certainly fell short in its lack of specificity, as well as in failing to address some of the key areas that we had identified as concerning to LPC and the mayor and so forth. So the proposed solutions, if you can even call them that, based on this initial announcement, are quite vague. And that's really the main kind of issue that we have at this point, that there's just not enough information. So they used phrases such as do more and enhance existing coordination, but it's not clear what any of that really means in terms of actionable items. So we were also disappointed to see that there were no concrete steps identified to penalize or otherwise hold accountable those, including landlords and possibly others who have been allowing these buildings to come into risk. LPC, I don't know if you all realize this, but LPC has the authority to require that felled landmark buildings be reconstructed as they were, but often they do not end up utilizing this authority that they have. So for one example is the case of 14 Gay Street, which is that building in the village that very dramatically and horrifyingly fell down fairly recently. So we, Village Preservation, strongly insist that the house be reconstructed as it historically was, but we have not received any guarantee from LPC or DOB that this would occur. And we're now deeply concerned about the conditions of the 4 adjacent jointly owned buildings along Gay and Christopher Streets, almost all of which now have vacate orders, and it's quite unclear what, if anything, is being done to make sure that they don't suffer the same fate. Just a couple other buildings to mention, we're increasingly worried about what the city is allowing to happen at 10 Fifth Avenue, which is 2 buildings over from 14, where work was approved by LPC and DOB, and that demolition work then caused damage to 10 Fifth Avenue. It's now not quite clear how damaged that building is, and it remains in limbo, and again, with no kind of actionable items from any of the agencies to figure out what to do about it. And then finally, at least for the moment, we're concerned about a new vacate order that's come to light at 33 Cornelia Street. This just happened in the past couple of weeks. And this was precipitated by unresolved neglect that the agencies presumably have known about for some time, and again, didn't take any mitigating steps toward early enough, and now it's becoming too late. So to conclude, we're glad that the city put forth an announcement. However, despite this kind of vague proclamation, things are continuing to worsen for a lot of the buildings in our neighborhood, especially. And so we still have few to no details on what the agencies are actually going to do. So we hope that you will, join us in pushing the city to come out with more specific points in what they'll do here. Thank you very much.
Could I ask a couple and sort of amplify on what you said? Is it that 12, despite the fact that 12 Fifth Avenue is between 14 and 10, obviously, it's not in peril?
Yeah, my understanding is that 12, at least from any investigation that's been done thus far, it appears to be stable. Yet 10, I think in part because it's a corner building, which made it a little bit more susceptible to kind of movement, is maybe what caused it to become damaged more easily. And we're seeing certainly visual evidence of it kind of like splitting from its neighbor.
Yeah.
So that's deeply concerning for sure.
And 14 Gay Street, just to get on the record tonight, with a little more detail, it was a building owned by an elderly woman, barely held together during her time. She died without a will. It went under the care of the city for some time, during which no efforts were made to shore it up, as it were, or sustain it. And I suppose I could say wanton removal of brick from the cellar area of the front facade with no reinforcement caused the front facade to be unsalvageable. Okay, thank you very much. And if you would stay along as we have our discussion, we'd appreciate it. Eugene, I just want to be clear, there are no people other than the committee who wish to speak now. Is that correct?
I do not see any other hands raised. That's correct.
Okay. I would say to start in my babbling to Pete, I think we're all in the same, we don't know what's being proposed so much. And it would seem that what we want is a simple statement of the principle of how we would like to see this happen, and leave details for the time that the proposal comes to us with some sort of specificity. Okay, who from the committee would like to speak?
Oh, with my hand up. Oh.
Well,
Yes.
speak.
Sorry. Sorry.
Okay. Go, Anita.
Oh, I'm up. Okay, great. Oh, sorry. Be quiet. My dog is chiming in. No, I think it's a matter of enforcement. You know, the problem is that caring for a building, neglecting a building and letting it fall into such disrepair is a business decision for a lot of people. So I think a lot of it really has to get down to enforcement and having the consequences be such that people actually do it. So yes, we need more specificity.
And
That's it.
do we not, in connection with that, do we not need more vigilance before it comes to the enforcement stage?
Well, enforcement just means somebody's actually checking it out. I mean, I don't know. Yes, I guess that I would say yes, but
I mean, not waiting for a complaint or something
yeah.
of that sort, but
Well, having some consequence, having some teeth in it, you know, so that it hits the bottom line. Money. That's all. Thanks.
other people wish to speak.
Yes, I'll speak. Certainly, I agree that there's not enough specificity in here, and that it does leave it up to whatever the departments, the Department of Buildings or the LPC to actually follow up with enforcement, as Anita said. They do talk about reinforcing or adding more staff for the enforcement purposes, but I think that it's the departments are chronically short-staffed. I think we've read about that condition, that it's hard to find qualified people to fill the positions. So the lack of specificity is a problem here. And I would say that, especially in the case of 14 Gay Street, that the fact that the city actually had control over these properties from Celeste Martin's estate and did not do anything to protect the buildings and simply passed it on to somebody else to worry about it is very problematic. It is an example of how they didn't really take their responsibility seriously. And hopefully the indication here from the mayor's office is that now they're going to take that responsibility more seriously, but without the specifics, we won't know. Don't know if it's going to be any different. So I just hope that we can get more from them. Thank you very much.
Could we add to the city's neglect, then it was inherited by a developer who was not shown responsibility,
Yes.
to wit, removing the bricks underneath the facade. Are there others who wish to speak?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I would modify it with expert staff.
Anita's hand is up, and Brendan's and mine and Valerie's, and there you go.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Albert.
I'm just listing the number of the names of the hands that I see.
Oh, okay. Eugene, whoever's next, please. You didn't have a comment?
Yeah, actually, Albert, do you want to go? And then Brendan?
Okay. What worries me is that this seems, as vague as it is, to depend on cooperation between those two agencies that never cooperate. I wonder if maybe the way to do this is to create a new department with staff that would be responsible for finding these properties, going to Fifth Avenue, going to Gay Street before the disaster occurs. That's it. I just do
Oh.
not see how this works with the bureaucracy.
As I understood from my reading about it, which has been reporting rather than what the city said, is that is to create a mechanism for this cooperation. It's not a voluntary one person calling another. So it's creating the mechanism which is presumably solves this.
And somebody from one of those two agencies is going to go out and walk around and look for a building that's in trouble. Is that it?
That
Okay.
seems to be the plan. What's their priority going to be is the question also.
Okay, Brendan, your time now.
Oh, sorry. Albert, were you done?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. You know, I'd love to say that DOB should get a preservationist. But anybody who's had experience with DOB, it's such a crony system that I'm not sure. But I think that would be a good step to put some responsibility onto DOB. So then there could really be communication. It won't just be left up to, I think, 2 people at LPC that they hired. You know, so to look at every building, how long is that going to take in the city? That's going to take years.
I'm not clear what you're saying. Are you saying to inspect any?
I would say,
suspect
okay.
building?
I would say that it would be a good idea if DOB hired a preservationist and not just rely on the LPC. I'm a little suspicious of the preservationist the LPC has now. They lost their main preservationist last year. They did hire 2 preservationists. That's good. Right now, I understand that the fire department is also involved. Again, that's good, but do they understand structure? The fine structure, the fines need to be like, as Anita said, they have to be real, you know, and I think condemnation should be on the table as well. And that maybe a system where any transaction that happens where a building is purchased triggers a preservation inspection. The other thing would be perhaps to make a watch list of suspicious developers. And then, you know, there's a lot of buildings that people just can't afford to you know, keep up. And then we really need to strengthen the hardship exception where and help pay for the necessary work. So, you know, just relying on us to go out and survey, there's just such a really, with fines of $2,000 it is a bad system. So that's my comments.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? Just speak up.
Val.
It's not back and forth, so. Who else would like to speak?
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Really quickly, point of inquiry, are we in business session right now? Are we going to be taking additional testimony on the next agenda item? And is this going to be the only discussion for the committee on this agenda item, or are we?
Yeah, we're going to
move
dispose of this and then go to the next one. So this is everything.
So we're in business session for everything now. I'm just asking because I don't know if I am only limited to
No,
comments.
I'm sorry, we're going to do this. We're expecting Susan to join us. We're going to do this and then we'll do the resolutions for the other things. I wanted to get this one in case there are people here.
Perfect. I was just wondering, so we're still going to take public testimony on the proposed rules, right?
We're going to finish this, which we're doing.
Perfect.
This is one session, and then
Great.
yes, okay.
I
Sorry.
have one additional, that's all right. one additional comment on this particular agenda item is that DOB has the Department of Buildings has a new commissioner that just got appointed at the end of April. Jimmy Otto, who's coming from the mayor's office and will be under, DOB falls under the current deputy mayor of operations, Mira Joshi. So landmarks and DOB are not under that deputy mayor, just buildings. So and also in the chat, I can only I guess since this is the borough president's account, I put in the chat a link to the press release, which has the 3 areas that this is addressing. It's obviously not the full proposal, but it does have the 3 issue areas, which are earlier detection and enhanced monitoring of at-risk buildings. And it kind of talks about some of the items that I think Eugene's putting it now for everyone to see. But I mean, I think that should really steer the conversation because that's the most of what we know.
Could
It
you
talks
just name
about,
those 3 out loud?
sure, I can. It's earlier detection and enhanced monitoring of at-risk buildings. And it's again talking about LPC and DOB working together. All the bullet points are there. It does state that LPC has recently hired additional enforcement staff to enhance the monitoring of identified buildings. The second is engineering review and increased oversight. It's increasing the types of application that will undergo review by LPC consulting engineers, has some DOP safety items in there and joint inspections for DOP and LPC. And then 3, enhanced community tools and outreach. And I think this is probably the most applicable to us. This is about saying LPC will provide additional violation information directly to the community boards. So I think any sort of statement should address, at least if we agree or disagree with any of the items in there as a starting point, since that's the most information that we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone at all wish to speak, Eugene? Or anybody? Just speak up if you do.
I do not see anyone else from our committee.
Okay, then do you have anything to add?
Was that for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Do you want to
Sorry,
add
my
anything
sound cut out for a
based on
moment.
what we've said? Or have we
No, I
covered it?
agree with what everybody's said. And I mean, just to further to several of your points about how it seems unlikely at this point that LPC and DOB would work together in the way that they're sort of saying they will. I agree that it's that's kind of a tenuous situation. It would be great, but I don't see how that would happen, but I would like to see it happen. So
And will you stay with us for the rules?
oh yeah, sure.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I have copious notes on what's been said, which is about 3 things of we don't know. And but there are a number of things on the list. If anybody has any specific thing they would like to see in the document that hasn't been said, say it now, and I'll work on a draft and circulate it. There's no time particular limit on this. We don't have to have it ready for the meeting on Thursday if it's not ready. And so if there's anything else that hasn't been said that needs to be added,
I just wanted to ask Dina, are you guys preparing a statement?
Regarding the rules.
Yeah. Oh, are we talking about the rules now? I thought
no,
we were
we're not there yet.
Oh,
No.
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to take a moment to do the resolution for the other 2.
Okay.
Okay, so now is the business session for the resolutions. If I can find it. For the first one is a letter of support. For all the discussion, is there anything we want to say in the letter of support that is not obvious, that we support it and that it is nice to have them beautiful and safe? To use our recent past Chair. Hearing none, we'll move on to Lafayette Street.
Sorry, one thing I want to add. I do think that they should really look into the practices in London and the practices in the early 19th century. I'm not sure if they have a historian, but it doesn't seem like they've looked into that. I don't know why I know this stuff, but I do.
Okay.
I had a quick comment on that. I would like to see if we could put in something about questioning the durability of those large stones, the granite for the crosswalks, just because of the large number of inquiries from the public around that.
Inserts. What he said was that this was, a statutory requirement.
Oh, no, just the durability of the materials.
Oh, durability. I'm sorry.
Yes, no, I'm not questioning. I mean, I welcome any ADA accessibility, but I would question, just because there's been so much anecdotal evidence that maybe there is some issue with.
Shirley mentioned that as well in a note. I'm sorry, I forgot to say it at the time. But
okay.
And my concern is just the
substrate installation.
Yes, so that would be the substrate would be the substrate would be the right word to use.
Okay, does that settle the letter? This is not going to be complicated, and basically we're supporting. I'm sorry, we're not approving. Lafayette Street and Crosby Street. We heard all the discussions. Are there any particular sections that we want to call out? Are there exceptions we want to take to the proposal?
I wish
nothing overwhelming.
Yes, my hand is up.
Yeah.
I wish that they could lighten up those louvers. They are so oppressive. And so very different from the adjacent.
I'm sorry, give me a moment.
That's on Crosby Street.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to say?
I would just
what we're looking for is exceptions to their presentation.
Yes, I would agree with the comments about the Crosby Street side should be a little more industrial with a higher bulkhead. Besides what Albert said about the louvers.
Any other points?
Are we okay with the illumination for that sign? I understand it's not. Is that illumination okay with the precedent for Soho?
It is what's been approved.
Okay.
The halo thing being rather than light inside the lettering.
Okay, so that's the distinction.
So
this is our third
exception to the standard.
This is our third watch store in the last couple of months.
Okay, Albert, I couldn't hear you.
Watches. This is our third watch store in just a couple of months. Just a little lightning moment.
It's a trend.
Don't people have iPhones to look at the time on? 52 Charles Street. Go bit by bit. The front facade is basically a restoration. The penthouse and the chimney extension, which got a lot of presentation, but is perfectly standard. I would like to object to the railing on the back and that it's visible. We have, in other instances, asked that it be simple metal rather than the stretched cable.
I agree, Chanel.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree also. I don't really care for that in the historic district. Just a
It's the
simple,
same thing as saying that glass is invisible.
yeah.
It's not.
This is fully visible. Could it be moved back some?
Yeah, this one is interesting in that it is very visible, right, from the street because of the configuration.
Well, because of the slope of the roof too, I guess the roof is very low there. It's just flat. It's not really, there's no parapet.
The other thing that was called out is the bay window and
Yeah.
Well, I think the
wasn't-
rendering is unfortunate. It probably would look better than the rendering showed it as. I don't know. No, it looked like it was made out of concrete when in fact it probably should be a little copper roof or something. I just
the
think
design of it doesn't, to my eye, look bad. Brian, you brought it up. Do you want to defend or?
Well, I would say that 2 feet is quite a punch out. You know, that's very distinctive.
Okay.
I would think that if I would recommend that it be reduced. I'll put it that way.
As opposed to deny unless, or they can't have.
Right.
Reduced, you mean to make it smaller or more shallow?
Shallower, yes. Just as shallow, make it shallower.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm so late. I had an unavoidable commitment prior.
You have come at the perfect moment. We have arranged
Yes.
for endless hours of testimony to wait for you. Just to fit, we're almost there, Susan. I have the railing and the bay window, and is that all the questionable things about this application?
yeah, it's fine. I mean, they had a lot of good reasons for what they did. So I have no objection.
I do think they've been very careful about a rear facade that conforms to what's there and that we want to see on 7th Avenue. It's typical
Yeah.
of the existing situation, if not historic.
Yep. I agree.
Okay, our final item is number 4. Proposed revisions to the landmarks preservation rules that permit LPC staff to approve certain applications. I propose that we go along the general lines of Susan's outline. And just a moment, I do want to get this to track so I'll know what people say. Okay. The first one is signs and banners. Oh, first of all, I think everybody's familiar. We had another similar proposal that we very much appreciated before, that to my reading of it did things that really were, if you will, mechanical decisions, and they were so straightforward that subjectivity would normally come into them. Among them, things like approved paint colors and precedents over and over and over about historic facades conforming to the historic building, contemporary infills conforming to regulations and so forth. And we were quite supportive and had no objection to essentially taking things off of our plate, the commission's plate, and or public hearing, as it were, and doing them. This one would seem to have more things that for us are subjective because they're things that we have so much discussed. We've the particular thing I'd like to call out before we have the public testimony is the screens, LED or whatever they are, and adjacent to that is illuminated signs and what sounds like imitation neon in the proposal. So if we could have all the hands of people who wish to speak from the public, please. And if Eugene, you could tally that just roughly, I'd appreciate it.
Sure thing. So we have two members of the public so far. First will be Laura and then followed by Pete. And if there are any other people that would like to speak on this issue about the LED screens, please raise their hand.
Please be as, I'm sorry, you're counting.
Okay, so Laura, you should be able to speak.
I'm sorry, how many are we?
We have, I think three people from the public.
Okay.
Laura, Pete, and then also Will Benesh, who's CB2 member.
Okay, we'll come to Will last because he's not the public.
Okay.
Okay. Remember, please, 2 minutes.
May I
and
ask for
Eugene will keep
clarification
on.
first? You had said you only want to talk about the LEDs now? Or
No,
is it-
anything. I was just pointing out that's the most controversial one
okay.
that's come up, and everybody's mentioned it. So
Oh, yes. LED wasn't, of course, an issue for me. But I did have some others. I know Pete is going to talk about LED a lot. And so I just want to say that I'm not happy with what they have there now, especially for Soho. Bright light shining in our eyes is a real issue. And I think it's totally inappropriate as well. It's not historically correct for the Soho area. It just doesn't fit. The internal neon sign, 6 inches is awfully close. 6 inches by the window is way too close. I want to talk about the ambiguity or the odd, so many things are left in the open. Painted wall signs, thing dear to my heart. What's the maximum size? We don't know. There's no indication of where the line is drawn there.
if I may speak to that, there are regulations written down. You'll hear later that we're going to object to it's not coming for public hearings because these are mathematical formulas based on the size of the wall. And we found instances where that doesn't feel good and doesn't look right, even though it conforms to the numbers. So
you're absolutely right. I think
that
that sounds wonderful, Chenault, but I'm doing this in a vacuum because I haven't heard any.
Exactly, yes.
So, so the other thing is, this is maybe a little whatever, but it really bothers me that they want to supplant the sworn statements from the owner respecting certificates for no effect with a simple written statement. I know that they're saying, well, the architects still have to file, et cetera, but that's taking away responsibility. And one of the things we've seen is that a lot of property owners are not responsible. I think it's important to keep that sworn statement requirement in there. Continuing on. There's some things missing. and I don't know where it stands, and maybe you guys know, whatever. Security camera placements. More and more buildings in historic districts need security cameras outside. There's nothing there about whether it's done on what level that decision is made, where it goes.
We do that. I mean, it comes for a public hearing.
Yeah, well, see, that's a question, because maybe it shouldn't have to go to you for something as simple as a small security camera. You know, it's a standard thing. Everyone's doing it nowadays. That would be something that I would ask you guys to consider suggesting that they add.
May I tell you what happened to me today?
What
The
happened?
building next door to me has put 2 white security cameras on a brick building with round industrial conduit connecting them.
Well, exactly. And if it
So
had
I would
gone-
like to veto your idea.
No. But maybe on the staff level, they'd be more likely to go to landmarks and ask for permission through, if it was only on staff level and not going through.
Right. I suspect that this is just they did it.
But you know, it is an issue, which is why I was saying it. The same thing is with how this is really funny, but how long is temporary? You know, they allow temporary things to happen, but I've seen temporary last for 2 years. Is that temporary? I wish they would define what temporary is.
We do too.
The other thing is tree planters, which is something very big in tree planters. They talk about planted in the ground. They talk about tree pits. They talk about other kinds of things, but they don't talk about trees in planters, which is very ubiquitous in Soho, because that's the only thing we can do. We don't have many places it can be put in the ground. Again, that's something that I think could be done on that level. But another thing that they don't seem to distinguish between accessory signage and advertising signage. And I don't know whether that's appropriate for landmarks or not, but I know in residential districts, only accessory signage, very little is allowed. Soho is going towards that. It now has a residential element. I don't know whether that's something to be considered or not, but it's distinguishing between that kind of advertising. Because one of the things that we've seen, for example, is a block away from me talking about what you go through, Chanel. There's a big lit LED sign in a window, about right on the window, and it says, your advertising can be here. And it's advertising for advertising. And in a window on Broome Street in Broadway. It's an issue. So that's all I wanted to bring up. I'm going to leave it to Pete to talk about the LED more deeply.
It sounds as though you've been part of our discussions already. Okay. Then to the first question along is the master plan expansion.
Oh, we still have a question. We still had Pete from the public.
Okay, whoever else, just keep the time and I'll try not to talk so much.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I really want to focus on the LED screens. This is something that I worked with when Terry Cood was chair a number of years ago. This has been an ongoing discussion as the LED screens have become more and more and more and more. Problem with LED screens is even though they're inside, they really flood light out and the impact of the signage. So what they're saying is they're adding LED screens for the first time to the rules. They were never there before. So now they're specifying that in section 2.2-13, section C8, it's mentioned for the first time. They only deal with them 18 inches in, which I understand that limitation. But often these screens are 15 feet within the store, but the light goes across the street. So one thing I'm going to point you all to is a BSA decision that we got for Scholastic at 557 Broadway in Soho when they were going for retail and there were concerns about illumination. And the BSA determined that that was proper, and they limited the timing that the signage could be on and had to be turned off. The link I just put in the chat, they actually said that all illuminated signage and window displays on the first floor of the building shall be dimmed by 50% within 1 hour of the closing of the retail use, or midnight, whichever is later. All illuminated signage and window displays on the second floor of the building shall be turned off upon the closing of the retail use, or 11 p.m., whichever is earlier. So there is some precedent there where the city,
Hi, baby. Oh, sorry.
where the city has said, yeah, this LED, this lighting coming out is problematic for the character of the neighborhood. Now, will they ever put that in the rules? I don't know. But this is our only opportunity to try to control this. Another place on Broadway is a big store that put in massive LED screens 10 feet inside, but they were blasting everywhere across the street. The neighbors talked to them and they said, oh, we didn't know, we'll turn them off. So it's not like these stores have to have them on in the middle of the night when there's no shoppers there. So anything we can do to convince the LPC that it's the color, the light and color overwhelms the buildings. It doesn't preserve them. It's purely a selling point. So I'm not sure what to do.
Can you wrap up? We're going to try to work on that.
I would, yeah, I'm wrapping up. That's it. Please, let's do something. This is our only chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, to get to the list, first is
Will has a question. Will Banish has a question.
What for Pete?
I just wanted to make a general comment.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think you're on the committee.
No. Thanks for letting me join.
But you're a guest.
Yes, thanks for letting me join. I'll be really quick. I don't know exactly how the LPC rulemaking process works, I must admit, but you know, it's interesting to see this proposal, which I guess would allow for what I'm hearing, it would allow for these LED screens to be on in storefronts all night if they're more than 18 inches back. Is that right?
No, this part is who makes the decisions.
Yeah.
This is something that we're going to amplify it to requesting clarity on what the
okay. My 2 cents is, I mean, we just had a long meeting last night talking about, you know, the rezoning that the city's doing to reduce carbon emissions from the city. And it seems allowing these screens to run all night is directly counter to that. There have been several studies that have come out that have shown how much power LED screens can use. In fact, large LED billboards, there was one study that showed that can be equivalent to powering 30 homes in a year. So it just doesn't make sense to me. I think these kind of screens should be discouraged for advertising purposes if the city's actually very serious about reducing carbon emissions. So that's my 2 cents to throw in for now. Thanks for letting me.
Well, I could just respond to that. We're not going to get rid of these LED screens. The real estate industry loves them. The retail industry loves them. And I would love to get rid of them. But I think if we go that direction only, I agree with you that the energy is something we should touch on. But I think we have to be somewhat realistic. And Brendan could probably speak to this a little bit too. I don't think they would have given this minor mention of LEDs with no controls, really, if somebody didn't say, no controls. So
okay. We need to move on, but we thanks. Okay, if you'll organize things for the executive session, please, Eugene. In some cases, we just want to say yes or no. Could we get the screen back? Oh. We would just want to say yes or no to the proposal. And in some cases, we want to say more. HVAC visibility. Do we have moving more of those decisions to the commission staff is the question. Who will speak? Okay.
Well, I think for the most part, that's all right. You know, it's not,
Okay.
it's a necessity.
I think we would just, and again, we've seen these, and they're sensitive, and in large part, the applications are to where it is, whether it's on top of a big building, a Soho, or a row house in the village. Signs and banners. This has been a perpetual discussion on our part, and I think some confusion sometimes as to what are regulations and what are standards. I think a few that have come to us that have been egregiously wrong, and presumably the staff could make the same sort of decisions. What does anyone have to say about them? Again, this is, are we objecting to moving more of the responsibility to the staff? If not, we'll move on. Storefront glazing attached lettering. We went into some detail about the building at the corner of Bleecker Street and 10th Street some time ago. And this is a thing. There've been a great deal. I looked at a couple the other day, and they just put a lot on it, or more restrained decoration, or a simple statement or two. Any comments? The grayscale for the windows when it's something you're not supposed to see is going on behind them. I believe this is just a cheap way to do frosted glass.
It's actually as if you have a fake window. That's really what it is, more than frosted. It's to make it look as if there was actually something behind it. And
Right.
they're very specific about this one screen that they like. We used to just paint it black. But now you have a screen that you adhere onto the glass.
And they also mentioned in the thing that where a storefront type window is used for back office kind of use, it's not appropriate to see it, and you don't want to see it, in fact.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine, you know, they're right now, that's the way they want to do it, and yeah, no problem.
It's not
I mean,
as
there
though
are
there are
things
tons of designs of grayscale.
yeah, they're very set on that, so just tell us what it is, and I'm sure everybody will do it. That's okay. It's not an everyday condition.
Dimensional signs on glazing. The others being applied signs. I'm not sure what it looks like.
I don't know what that is. What is that? Dimensional sign?
I guess it's like gluing a cutout letter, doing a dimensional letter rather than a piece of vinyl.
Yeah, we've approved that. We approved it on pair of jumpers. I just,
Plaque signs. We have commented on them from time to time, but it seems like something that a reasonable person could decide. Any comments?
No, I think the main thing is that everything be kept small. You know, it's when the scale gets too big, it overwhelms the historic district. So I think it's a matter of scale too.
So we're not going to object to moving at least part of this. I will say that in the past, they've been very good to push to a public review things that were considerably questionable. And we would certainly hope that continues.
Well, they also have a very clear mandate. If it isn't in their rules and regulations, they cannot approve it. They
Right.
don't use a lot of nuance. It's just it cannot be approved at staff level, something specific.
And
So
that's why
this
we get
is
something like the doorbell.
doorbell, or I don't know, many things, I think. So this is just expanding their ability to review it.
I don't know what permits not required for construction. I think that's interior construction that doesn't have anything to do with the outside of the building. Because one sees them.
I believe that's true. But again, it's going to cross over later in this discussion.
Now, switching approved banners on the same pole. This would seem to be a companion to approving the banners in the beginning. And that indeed is how the painted wall signs work now. I think this is just expanding that idea. No objection?
About the banners?
Yeah.
The banners specifically, Chenault?
Yeah, yes, if the banner's been approved, its size basically and so forth, and it conforms to regulations of however that works, that they can switch the design or the thing as long as it's the same banner on the same pole that is different.
Same size, I
If
guess.
I understand it correctly. I've highlighted the next one as something that we'll maybe want to say more about is painted signs.
Pet peeve.
And I put in the notes about all we had to say about the one in the Gansfort district beside Florent's former establishment, and how it looked like it covered more space than it did because you couldn't see the full space of the wall. And we've had other instances of that sort as well. I don't know
think it
how
Go ahead.
and if this is sort of an all or nothing thing we're saying, but we can say whatever we want to. From our history, it seems to me we want to keep some review of those.
I would agree. I would agree with Chenault that we do want to have purview over something that's appropriate, even for the master plans for signs.
We'd want to basically keep as it is then.
Yes.
I think that's the.
And we always make suggestions or corrections or comments. I mean, rarely is it, oh, okay, it's fine. Because usually it's having to do with the placement and the architecture of the building and where it is in relationship to the edge of the building. I mean, we always seem to have comments.
We have a lot
right?
to say.
We have a lot to say.
I think it's very clear from our considerable experience reviewing these master plans that there is a certain amount of visually subjective aesthetic assessment that needs to be made. And if the LPC and these proposed LPC rules don't really seem to have a way to accommodate that, but we know from our experience that this is important, that scooching the sign in from the front facade a few inches even can make a tremendous difference in, you know, what the how the sign appears and how it relates to the building. So if there's no possibility, and I think there isn't, for the LPC to develop a way that there is like a case by case, individual, a more nuanced, a more subjective, but that sort of goes against bureaucracy to do that. And they do have an obligation to be even handed. So for those reasons, I guess I would say I would agree with you, Chenault, that we should hold on to those.
And don't forget protecting ghost signs, which should be our responsibility.
Under the sustainability, staff review for pit size, abutment, and historic paving.
Excuse me for interrupting.
Yep.
Chenault, but in terms of the signage in general, there is one thing where I can't find it at this moment, but there is in the proposed regulation amendments an adjustment of the cumulative impact of the signage that's mentioned. And I think we need to pay attention to that, because if they're expanding their ability to review and expanding the type of signs that they're considering permissible, I'm concerned about the cumulative impact of the signage in general, that the aggregate of this sign, that sign, the other sign in a small storefront is something that's going to get lost there. So I think we do need to make a comment about expressing concern that any adjustment of their cumulative signage assessment not result in increased signage, increased volume of signage. So if there's going to be more types that are allowed, these dimensional letters, God knows what's going to happen with LEDs, horrible LED screens or whatever. But I think we have to make some kind of statement saying that the aggregate cannot be any larger, that by expanding the typology, they cannot be expanding the aggregate amount of signage in a historic district.
Okay. We'll have a section on signage because that's something we want to hold on to.
Yeah.
And that could be
So,
part of it.
Following up on that. So since they are defining, they're defining interior LEDs as signage, that we need to make sure that that also falls into the category of.
Let's take LED on its own for us, because what we're we're going to ask for
that's specific
in LEDs.
But that signage, Right, but that signage and falls into the category of overwhelming signage. So that should also.
Yeah, we'll
be
just
involved.
treat LED, we'll get to that, but we'll do it on its own. Any LED-ness is gonna be.
Okay, all right, sounds
Well,
good.
Chanel,
Yeah.
there's two types of LED. One is the screen, which is
Okay,
the
we'll do that
sign.
later. We'll do that later as an LED topic.
Okay.
We're
all
just disposing of everything else first, because that's such a.
Got it.
Staff review of pit size abutment and historic paving. I can't guess that. Anybody want to hold on to that? No. Solar panels. This is right before us because of Eugene's wonderful committee's work. To my mind, we want to see solar panels. I'm saying to my mind, a lot of this is things I've gleaned from the notes and
You want to see solar panels? Is that what you just said?
no, we want them to come before the
Oh,
public view.
okay. Okay, great. Sorry. Getting late,
You want to
guys.
see them so they won't
Okay.
be seen.
Well, there's a difference between what I see on the amendment sheet of LPC, that letter that you passed around, and the presentation we saw last night in Eugene's committee. In last night's presentation for the general zoning changes, the solar panels are going to be, if approved by this zoning change, the solar panels would be allowed to come all the way to the edge of the roof, all the way to the building wall. And it could be 15 feet high. And there were a lot of elements that are very, very obtrusive. And in non-historic areas, that may be fine. But I think that the LPC letter of changes to the code are specific about continuing to not be too obtrusively visible, and it seems to conform and to reinforce the criteria that we've been using before. So on the one hand, what I see in the LPC letter seems to satisfy me in terms of continuing with the restrictions and limitations, and not allow it to go as far as they do for the non-historic districts. So in that regard, I'm pleased with it. Whether it all should just be staff level or not, no, I don't. I agree with Chanel that it should continue to come before us.
Okay. And we can say a little bit about each of these things that we want to come before us. Why? And I suspect this is something that they haven't really formulated historic district rules about, so we'll encourage that.
Not at all from what we saw.
Well, in that meeting that we attended downtown, where all the community boards were invited and only 30 people showed up. But Jeff the lawyer showed us several solar panels that had already been approved by the LPC.
And what did they look like?
They were dark.
Yeah, and how visible?
They were very visible.
Yeah.
From on a front facade, on the edge of the facade. Yes. That was to me a big surprise. Were you there, Brian, for that?
No, I was not. But that's good. Not good to approve that sort of thing.
I was very surprised and yeah, actually very pleased. So That's my speech.
And I
To
think also with this, we'd want to say something about formulating some rules about it. Or if we did, if there are rules and we don't know them, that we know them.
Historic
I
materials.
don't recall any solar panels ever having come to a meeting that I attended.
Yeah, we had one on Jones Street. With the view was right, I know, because the building on Carmine Street, I looked right out on it. But I remember at that particular presentation, I thought they should look into alternative solar panels that don't look like solar panels. There
I
are,
remember that, a
Tiles.
type look.
Yeah.
yeah, it could be Slate or whatever. And I think that technology, especially if we have a need for it, there'll be, maybe the price will come down or more available, but I think that's really the direction to go. To have these big flying saucers on top of every building is going to look like we live in a computer board when you look out on the skylight on the rooftop.
What we need to do is say that there needs to be formulation of what to do about solar panels in historic district, so they don't intrude. And in the codify approved precedents, minimally visible sloped roof permitted if fleeting side or back view. This would seem to exclude things like rooftop additions or what we saw today. Is that agreed?
I don't think I understood what you said, Chenault. Maybe everybody else did.
Yes, say it.
It says permit minimally visible sloped roofs permitted if fleeting side or back view. What we would call minimally visible, I'm sure. And if it's something as simple as a sloped roof, I can't think that we would object to their deciding it. As long as we
Is
keep.
this for solar panels?
I'm just reading what's there.
Okay.
And saying what
we should think about removal of historic material, I think, if it's solar panels. For
Well,
example,
we want to review them. That's the main issue. We don't want to give staff, but that's not on the rules adjustment. This is separate now, right? This is fossil fuels.
These are the sort of things that are not rules. It's things like minimally visible. Impact with color, configuration, flat to roof, and a skirt. I'm not sure what that is. I'll try to find out. I think I've just picked up a part of it.
Well, what they talk about in that letter or the letter of changes is that all the trim around the panels have to be black, and the skirt has to be black so that it all matches, and to hide all of the wires and the framing and so forth underneath it.
That would seem to be flat roof commercial design permit more visibility. A flat roof is as invisible as it can be.
Except if you bring it to the edge, then it's not.
Yeah, bringing it to the edge or raising it up above.
Raising it up high, 2 stories. Unbelievable.
Do we want to keep this then?
Well, we want to continue to press them to allow us to review it.
Yeah.
And not to give a carte blanche staff approval on this stuff.
Be careful to say public review rather than to us, but that's
public review.
Maybe windmills instead.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was one sentence and I put a capital letter. Flat room commercial, not It's a structure on top of a roof. It's the roof of a penthouse.
Well, also these roofs are very small. I don't even know how much energy they're gonna produce if you have a little solar panel on top of a little tiny penthouse. I mean, they're covering huge areas. I don't know, that was part of the presentation last night too. Right, Eugene? The amount of coverage was like
Yes.
99%.
It's 100%. I mean, it's 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the 15 feet is so that it can go over existing bulkheads and so on a roof.
Imagine
It's-
what the roof
this
is going to
whole
be
roof
like.
thing, could I say that we want it to be clarified?
I would say,
Well, for
especially in
historic
light of,
districts.
yeah, especially in light of the fact that they are considering changes to solar roof rules, including setbacks and heights.
Yeah, exactly.
When in doubt, it should come for public review.
Yes.
Increased fleeting view approved by staff.
Huh?
That's so subjective. We anguish over a 2-foot top of a penthouse showing over the front of a building.
Mhm. Mhm.
What situation would that come in? What situation would a fleeting view come in? If it's not before us? What would that be?
Of what?
What would a fleeting situation be, fleeting view situation be?
I think it's what we call minimally visible.
Okay. That would be like the new elevator bulkhead, right? So we
We
probably
are
see
very
that.
particular about what minimally visible means.
Yeah.
It's something that, if there's something that we've decided a lot and talked about a lot, it seems it's something we want to continue to see. Is that a good principle?
Yes.
Yes.
Auxiliary equipment unobtrusive. And that's a companion thing is modified HVAC equipment.
Well, in that regard, it seems, I want to say it seems to be in keeping with the previous rules and the criteria that we apply. And so the question is, are we going to turn it over to them or do we want to have public review? And I think it's still good to have public review. Same thing.
And that's part of the visible. If anything's visible, that's going to be visible.
Yeah, still subjective.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense.
What we have said is we want to see anything on a roof that is visible.
Yes.
And that covers several of these that we've talked about.
Yes.
Master plan expansion, and I'm not sure what that means. So I'm going to say so. Okay, again, I want to skip over the whole LED thing and we'll come back. Oh, it's the end. Have I left out anything?
Yes, Chenault, the self-certification aspect is something that I think deserves some
It
discussion.
is the end. I'm sorry. Let's do it next. I cannot understand what that is except a convenience to developers or to applicants.
I can't see any, I mean, all it does is dilute accountability. And, you know, given the challenges of enforcement already, adding one more invitation to game the system doesn't really sound advisable. And what is so onerous about having to offer a sworn statement, which is the system that currently
I would
exists?
assume that's a notary.
You know, I mean, that hardly seems onerous. And, you know, the whole thing is very disturbing and reminds me of an expression of my father's, which was, that's like sending the lettuce by rabbit.
Dina has her hand
Anyway,
up.
I think that I think that like no good will come of it in this particular thing. And I see that Dina's got her hand raised.
Yes, thank you. And this is not to agree or disagree with you at all. I just want to offer a point of clarification just because I'm aware of it with this sworn statement thing. It was made clear to me that it's only for expedited certificates of no effect, which are only when it's solely for interior alterations above the first floor. So just to kind of clarify that, I know that LPC is trying to further expedite these extremely expeditious cases that never are about storefronts or exteriors or anything like that. And in those cases, they have always required notary publics to be involved in the process. And now they're trying to make it so that it's just a standard signature from the owner, just like the regular permits. And again, not trying to put my opinion in, but just say that's what my understanding is that it's about.
So
That's
if
very
we
helpful.
think that
Thank you.
we
So you're
deal with
saying that
things
this
that
only
show that
applies to interiors?
Correct. It's only for their special permit that's called an X-Key,
Expedite.
which is
Yeah.
for only interior expedited ones. So I don't know whether we should have an opinion on that or not, but that is the only case that they're talking about here.
Thank you for that clarification.
Could we just ask for clarification that that storefronts are not included? That if it is actually over the first floor?
Huh?
Yeah, I know that currently the X-Key permit never allows storefronts to be part of that, but yeah, I certainly, I mean, please ask them to clarify anything that you want to be doubly sure about.
Well, that's not really for us because we don't deal with anything inside anyway. So it would seem to me we don't object.
But we should. And moving forward with the LEDs, but that's later.
Okay. If I could find my place.
Decals.
There's several aspects. Let's do specifically LEDs first, and then we'll do the other ones like the imitation neon and so forth.
Are we gonna deal with the decals?
Okay.
We're gonna do that afterwards, or
The LED situation is that there are virtually no regulations now. There's the 18-inch regulation, presumably, though it seems to be violated frequently in my walking around. And the question is, what can be regulated about them? Size. Oh, well, what seems offensive about them, as we've talked about, is the fact that the light that they emit is overwhelming often. What can you do to an LED except limit the size or where it is?
I think that the way they've described it in a very curious way. And I think they're saying it's allowable behind 18 inches, but then putting parameters on the area. So it would be beyond 18 inches, but they're saying it can't be more than 50% of the window, and it can't be more than 75% horizontally. That's my understanding, but it's really strange because the way they've written it is they've called it signage and then they've gone and called it partitions. So that's, who knows? Anyways, I did send that, I believe, to you, Chanel. Just, I'm like, is that what they mean? That it's allowable beyond 18 inches, but then they are putting a window area limit.
Is that window area the observable? I mean, so if the screen is 18 inches, right, if it's 18 inches behind, is it, you know, viewable from the street? Is it X percentage of the window, or is it the screen is limited to X percent of the window and it needs to be 18 inches behind?
And where are they looking from? If it's 15 feet behind, are you still, where is that rule?
Well,
right. And also no limits on the brightness.
Let me clarify. What they're up against, it would seem, is that there is no jurisdiction now beyond the famous 18 inches. And that's a problem because you see farther than 18 inches, obviously, particularly you see a bright screen farther than 18 inches. I somehow think this is a discussion outside of what staff approves, because what we've heard tonight from ourselves and from the public is light pollution. And the noise of movement. And those are things that grow from the programming of the LED and requires a whole different kind of regulation, it would seem.
Well, the LEDs don't really come to us, the screens. They're just approved by staff already. We don't see the LED screens. They pop up later.
It would be nice to know if they actually have approved any.
I think
well, I think they're approvable. They are, because they're as per the regulations.
If
I think we need to see this as an opportunity to opine on the increasing, what will undoubtedly be the increasing use of LED signage. I mean, the wire around us having there be a public review of these things in the past is this magical 18 inches. First of all, we all know that nothing, at 18 inches, it's not like these things disappear from the streetscape. They absolutely do not. We know that they're beyond noisy visually. We know that the degree of illumination is unacceptable. We know that they're programmed in sequence or with motion, they're motion programmed, sometimes they're motion activated. I mean, and we know that this is a constantly evolving technology. So to give a carte blanche to LPC to say, sure, LED signs right on, it is absolutely nothing we should be doing, because who knows 5 years from now what these screens will be able to do and what we will have given away by in any way supporting this. And I think their very inclusion of them in this is kind of a tacit encouragement to continue using them. And we know store owners just love them. And, we also know how utterly inappropriate they are in historic districts. I mean, we've heard from several members of the public and our very own Brendan on the problems in Soho. And, I could go on and on. but won't, about the negative impact here in the village. So opening the door to anything that will increase the ease of store owners' use of LEDs is nothing we should be supporting.
Even if they're trying to regulate, so one thing that's concerning is that they're trying to regulate the area, and that's a slippery slope. So the visible area inside the window, even if it's 15 feet, I think, it's about the amplification, it's about the lumens, it's about the speed of the image shift. So yeah, there's just so much, but I think that we also need to ask for clarification about the area, what they mean by the area of the
Certainly
window.
for less vague language in this, so that there are specifications regarding, intensity of illumination, that there's clarity on what this proportion of a window is, as several people have pointed out, that there are limits on motion, that there are hour limits so that they're not running all night long. I mean, there's just so many ways these things need to be restricted, and these rules don't address any of them.
And the zoning doesn't address it either, which is so complicated because we could really call them billboards. And there's a lot of research being done on the effect of billboards, animated billboards, and safety. But there's no zoning. It's happening so fast that nobody can keep up with it, which is what I found. There's scholarships there, but even they're just like, wow, this is brand new. Yeah, it's distracting, and they've done all these studies say, yeah, it's just, the field of vision comes off the road. So anyway, but the historic, I mean, it's like, well, what's the point? What's the point of preserving materials if we're just going to overwhelm the building with who knows what, In Soho, it's, naked people or semi-naked people in rapid succession. So
here's where we stand on these. Nobody wants them at all.
Except the businesses, they want them.
They're part of what presents with a landmark building, and they're intrusive on the landmark district. And there is no control over what's shown on the screen. And that's where we stand and why we object to them, is that.
And the number of hours is a biggie, because that we could probably get that through. That an hour after closing, it's got to go whatever the regulation we suggest or would mean a lot.
I think we've got enough raw material to come up with that section.
Well,
Can I ask,
and it goes beyond who approves them.
yeah, can I ask a question?
This is sort of an adjunct to what they're asking for, which is, do you want to keep reviewing it or not?
I just want to make sure that we're not confusing the two different LED types that I'm visualizing. One is the screen, that's clear, LED screen. The other is the LED lighting in the actual letters, like the one we approved tonight. Is that something that they are asking for permission?
These are screens.
Well, it says actually LED slash screens. So is it clear?
It doesn't say that specifically. I looked too quickly.
Yeah, because there are those LED screens that LED signs that are signage, which
they're
I've seen.
illuminated.
Yeah, like for
inside.
delis and things like that, with like lots of animation happening. And by the way, Pete Davies from the public has his hand up. I think we're still allowing public comment, right?
Oh, this, yes.
Yeah.
Wait, no, I'm sorry. We've done that. We did that before we started.
Oh, are we no longer allowing public?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not, because it was clear we ended the public, we did the public first.
So back on the LED, what I see in the language is that there's LEDs slash or, TV in small letters after it. I think that's how they try to describe this as an animated screen or monitor or whatever you have, as opposed to just a
The
LED bulb.
fixture.
within the sign.
Okay.
Right, and then we have another topic, which I think is the last one, which is signs. I don't have the text before me because I've extracted, but it is what I think are the ugliest things in the world. It's signs that somehow mimic neon with LED. It almost looks like it's an illuminated signage using narrow LEDs to draw the line of neon.
I don't think we have those in our neighborhood, do we?
Oh, we
I
have
don't even.
tons of them. Like all
do?
the signs on the illegal cannabis shops are that.
Oh, yeah, all right, forget it, you're right.
It
Oh,
never
gosh.
entered my
Yeah,
head
that's
they were
that's what
trying
I
to
was
be neon,
thinking.
but that it
You're
would
right.
seem to be what they're talking about. Do we want to simply review any lighted signs, and that's our position?
I like that. Because it always tends to be too much lighting. So we want to be able to keep a lid
It's so
on
very
it.
particular about where they are.
Yeah.
Can we also specifically object to LEDs, LED screens in general, if they're visible? Would that would be something that would come before us? Like, if they're visible from the street, then we look at them. Because, the interiors are just gonna happen. And we never get to look at the interiors except in the first 18 inches. So this pushes it into the realm behind 18 inches, even though it becomes part of the architecture in ways that other interior features do not. So when they're starting to call them partitions that are behind 18 inches, then that's when things get crazy. And then we get Las Vegas. And the weird thing is that they're calling them signs. So they introduce them in their signs section, and they say, any other illuminated signage, including LED screens, must be at least 18 inches set back from the inside pane of the glass at the display window or transom, and must otherwise meet the requirements in paragraph 10, subdivision C, section 2-12, which is the partitions. So that's the partitions and how much window area they take up. So they're saying behind 18 inches, we're putting the LED screens in that realm, but we're also saying that it can take up 50% of the window space, in general, but not more than 75 in horizontally.
What we want is a strong statement limiting LED screens altogether.
As a for the purpose of historic preservation, right? So that's a historic preservation issue.
It
We
ruins the
believe that
building and it ruins the
interferes.
neighborhood.
Yeah, in a way that other technologies we haven't seen yet. This is a new entity, and yeah.
Okay, to get back to all the other signs, we want to review all illuminated signs. Is that it? I mean, public review of illuminated signs.
Oh, yes.
This is so far from approving one of 5 colors to paint the windows on a brick row house in the village. And that's the kind of thing they've been approving.
Yeah.
So it seems to me it's a time to clamp down on the principle of what are bound to be aesthetic effects, if not aesthetic judgments.
Right.
Susan, have I omitted anything from your perspective?
I don't think so, Chenault. Does anybody else feel that who's reviewed this feel that there's anything that's been omitted? I see Valerie's got her hand up.
Thanks. So are we gonna address the fact that, and it's from the link that Eugene shared about 4253, that DOB was supposed to set those light limits, but they didn't. And so now the resolution will, or our statement will include that
That was from Pete.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a
that
little
was
Yeah,
hard to
Brendan,
hear.
you had sent around Pete's stuff, but since Pete didn't have a chance to talk at the end, because I know we're in business session, I just wanted to make sure that that we would address that they were supposed to set the limit, but they didn't. And I apologize if I missed that. It's just late, so.
I couldn't hear you clearly, Valerie.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah, you're.
So I was just asking if the statement would address that from what Pete had shared via Brendan's email earlier this week about 4253. It's in the chat about DOB establishing the light levels. Are we going to address that was never, that's a law that's still there, but has not been addressed? And I apologize if this was covered. It's just late. So I was just.
I don't think it's been covered.
Okay. Just bring it up. Thanks. Sorry, it's been a long night. Thank you.
Okay. The good news after all this is there's no Monday meeting, if anybody missed out on that.
When we ask for clarification, will they give it to us in time for the public hearing on the 23rd?
Who knows? We'll send it along and ask them. And that's the
in the meantime, we have probably 400 violations in Soho. I can just overwhelm them with all of the LED violations and signage violations. It's a lot of work, but
if you have that
maybe
list,
that's
I'd be interested in seeing that.
We have them in the village too that haven't even registered. So they're everywhere.
yeah, none of these have been registered. Yep. So
so let's deal with this, which is reacting to what was sent as the regulations. We'll ask for clarifications on those several subjects and hope that we get something that's useful. I'm not sure that as we went through and decided what to say, that the clarifications are going to help change our position. The one thing that got clarified was interior renovations, and now we know, and so we're happy. There is no other going forward news that I know of. And
we didn't discuss the decals. The decals, I don't think we discussed those.
Yeah, we had them earlier on, applied vinyl.
We had
something like that.
Well, what I'm talking about is when you put advertisements on those back of house windows. So that's something that happens all the time here. I sent some pictures of those around. And so the way that can happen is that with the expedited permit or whatever they're saying, like you get one permit, you can change the sign whenever you want, but the sign is, that decal is only supposed to say for sale or for lease. So, and I think Susan mentioned that too.
So what we're talking about is what's serving the purpose of the gray application, but with something written on it.
It's a separate issue than the gray. And actually, maybe I misspoke
So in
about back of the
situations where there
house.
would be a gray, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, it actually is. If a building is for sale or for lease, it can put a sign, decal, poster. They can paint it on the wall, and then they never have to go back for a permit or anything to change that. So that creates a situation where they can sell the ad space, or they can then put decals, put their own.
Okay, so
their
that's
own
a
advertising.
clarification thing, right?
That would be, no, that's a warning, I suppose. This could happen when you're just allowing the for rent, for lease, or for sale, for lease signs, and you do not have to go
Changing it
back.
to advertising. Is that what you're saying?
That is the policy. As far as I understand what they're trying to do, you can do a for sale, for lease, but now they're saying that once you have that, you can keep changing it. So that just as a moral hazard, that it'll just become, billboard pollution. That makes
Okay.
sense?
Anything else? Okay, thank you all. I had no
What's
idea
the
the
next step?
sidewalk was going to be the big feature of the night. The ramps.
Yeah.
And-
What's
but-
next steps? What's next steps with this?
Oh, we're going to have our comments. It's not a resolution, it's comments about their proposal to send to them.
Okay,
Our status, we don't have to wait for the public hearing.
got it. So you're gonna send them around, or you're just gonna interpret? Yeah, okay. Cool.
Okay. Is that it? Anybody else have anything? Thank you, and thank you, Dana, and welcome, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks so much.
Okay,
Thanks,
great.
Dana.
Mother's Day.
We don't normally go so late, so you'll get your supper soon.
Yeah, you scared me away. I'm just kidding.
Oh, no.
And Eugene
Come
will be in
back,
touch
Dina.
about our liaison committees.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Right.
Good night.
Don't forget Mother.
Oh.